very frustrating thing I do is anytime a concept is introduced, I ask what it means, and usually it's not all that straightforward. So I want to consider a few different ways that we. I'm going to introduce a tentative definition, and the hope there is that once we have an idea of what we're trying to describe, then the science, we can better evaluate the scientific findings to figure out if it's actually describing the phenomena that we wanted to make sense of in the first place. Oh, okay. So we've all experienced a moment of creative insight. That moment where the light bulb goes off, and we have sort of a eureka, and something that we didn't think before becomes very apparent to us. It often becomes obvious to us once we've had this moment of insight. Or maybe ideas that we couldn't grasp earlier become clear. But despite the fact that I imagine everyone in this room has had countless moments of creative insight, both small and large, it's still a very mysterious phenomenon. And its mysteriousness also makes it quite valuable. So we consider people who seem to have their creativity well honed and have a lot of creative insights that are productive to be very valuable people to know, valuable people in our society, in our histories, and in sort of all fields of art, of science, of technology. So it's both mundane, in that we all have experienced it, but extremely interesting and special in that we don't quite know how to harness it. So I'm going to talk a bit about how, about how some of the great philosophers have defined creativity. So highlighted here, we have Socrates and Plato. Socrates, you always know Socrates because he has a snub nose. And that comes up a lot in the dialogues too. They often describe him as being quite unattractive because of that. So if you're ever wondering who Socrates is, that's how you know. Socrates and Plato were both of the opinion that creativity is supernatural. It is an instance in which the muses breathe into the creative person, and they're thinking particularly about artists here and poets. So the way they're describing creativity is really focusing on that mystical, difficult to grasp part of it. But it's a bit unfortunate because it also means that it's something that happens to you that you don't control, right? So if Plato and Socrates are right, then being creative, you're as responsible for being creative as you are for catching a cold. It just happens to you. Aristotle, on the other hand, because he usually disagreed with his mentor Plato, felt that creativity was just a way of following rules. It's a rule-oriented activity. It's no more magical or mystical than any other sort of rule-oriented activity that we engage in. So to Aristotle, what a great poet is doing isn't something that involves spirits and muses breathing into him, but rather it's harnessing certain rules about how to manipulate human emotion and applying them to a text, right? So some people are just more skilled at applying those rules and sort of knowing them and knowing when they're going to be most effective, but there's nothing sort of special or supernatural about it. Kant felt that creativity was an innate capacity, that most of what we do when we're reasoning and interacting with each other is rule-oriented, and we should try to make it rule-oriented because that's what it means to be rational, but that certain people are born with this innate capacity to also violate rules and produce interesting and original content. And he's thinking also about art in particular. So for Kant, scientific progress, applying the scientific method, that's rule-oriented, so it's not creative. So one interesting question to keep in mind when you're thinking about creativity or you're reading about sort of the findings from brain science about creativity is who's being counted as creative here, because it varies. For some thinkers, you can be creative in any field. For some folks like Kant, like Plato, like Socrates, creativity is really something relegated to the arts. Next, we have Nietzsche, whose theory of creativity is closest to what the brain scientists we talk about a little later in the presentation are going to be positing. So Nietzsche suggested that within each person there are sort of multitudes, there are different sort of spiritual influences, but a lot of what he's saying there can be thought of in terms of conscious and unconscious influences on our thought. So Nietzsche thought that there was this rational part of ourselves that was very sober and very deliberate and thoughtful and careful, and that there was a passionate part of ourselves that was exuberant and passionate and intoxicated, right? And that when we're creative, when we're successfully creative, those two parts of ourselves are in communication with one another. So the passionate part is generating these sort of novel and wild ideas, and the sober part is turning them into action. Okay. An important distinction I would like to introduce that has been argued for by more contemporary philosophers. Whether or not this is right, I think is something that's worth questioning, but we can distinguish between creativity and perhaps originality, or what we might call innovation. So in that picture, creativity is something that happens in the head. We often call new inventions creative. We might say that the iPhone is creative, or that a new play is creative. But this distinction suggests that maybe we want to peel apart whatever is happening in the mind of the creator and the product they produce. So the suggestion is that we call the mental stuff, whatever that happens prior to the production, the creative thing. And then a product of creativity that is useful is original. Another valuable distinction is between historical and psychological creativity. The idea here is that there are moments where ideas come into the world that weren't there previously, and those ideas haven't existed historically or within that community, right? And that would be historical creativity. We should expect those moments to be quite rare. So, you know, a new way of thinking about physics, or a new invention, or perhaps, you know, a new piece of art that is original and valuable that we haven't seen before. That would be historically creative. A new mathematical proof, perhaps. Psychological creativity, on the other hand, is probably, again, quite common. That would occur whenever a new idea comes into existence for a person that they hadn't thought of before. So if you were, you know, just thinking about geometry and you haven't studied triangles to any great extent, and you're just measuring the angles of triangles, and it occurs to you that every time you do, the three angles add up to 180 degrees, you might have a moment of personal insight and realize that in your own history, you've come to this conclusion that the angles of triangles always add up to 180 degrees. That wouldn't be historically creative. A lot of people know that. It's not that interesting. But it could be personally and psychologically creative. I mention this just because when we are thinking about creativity, particularly in the context, in contexts like these, we're probably interested in creativity that is historically relevant and produces original results. So that isn't just an internal or personal experience, but rather has community value. And thinking about creativity in this way does make it an inherently communal commodity. So it's something that is important in relation to other people. So I want to sort of piece together a proposed definition. I'm sure that there are ways that this could be revised or expanded or made more restricted, but I think that this will capture most of what we want for our purposes. So it's an ability to produce ideas. So again, here we're focused on the mental. We're focused on what's going on in our heads and not so much the products that we're making when we're thinking about how to be more creative. In a way that isn't random. So some things probably shouldn't count as being creative. If you gave 1,000 monkeys a typewriter and they eventually produced Shakespeare, we probably don't want to call that creative. If I throw a bowl of spaghetti at the wall and it produces a shape that we find aesthetically pleasing, we probably don't want to celebrate my creativity. So this suggests that truly creative ideas require a sort of judgment. You have to be doing something intentionally, and you have to stop yourself intentionally at some point in order for that to count as creative. But at the same time, it must not be mechanical. So paint by the numbers, which happens to be one of my favorite hobbies, probably doesn't count as creative because there's not enough room for judgment involved, right? You're just following rules. Following a recipe probably doesn't count as creative unless you're deviating from the recipe in some way. Here is an image of, or a depiction of Charles Goodyear, who discovered how to vulcanize rubber and make it much more resilient. But he's often accused of, while being quite innovative and original, not being creative, because the way he did this was he applied every chemical he could think of to rubber until something worked. So just going through a list of chemicals is a mechanical process, probably not a creative one. These ideas must be new, they must be novel, so this is perhaps the most obvious aspect of creativity. If the idea existed before, not creative. And of value. So I could come up with a new word by just combining letters, and maybe I carefully select the letters so they're not randomly selected. But if it doesn't have any value, if it doesn't do anything for us, perhaps it shouldn't count. Now there are lots of kinds of value. There's monetary value, there's moral value, aesthetic value, functional value. So lots of things could count as valuable on this definition, but it probably needs to do something for us. And again, the fact that creativity needs to be, something needs to be a value to count as creative makes it, again, very communal. Value is something we decide together. So what's going to count as being a creative insight is going to depend on our relationships with one another. So the definition put together, creativity is an ability to produce ideas, neither randomly nor mechanically, that are both novel and of value. So, in a recent podcast that Frank and I did together, Frank runs the podcast, he interviewed me, and it was a lot of fun. I would encourage you all to go look it up. It's the Dig Deeper. Dig Deeper on SoundCloud. Dig Deeper on SoundCloud. We're discussing artificial intelligence, and much of the discussion was focused on morality in artificial intelligence, but we did have, we spoke a bit about whether or not creativity is an essentially human characteristic. So is it one of the things that makes us, not just animals, but humans, makes us special and contributes to what sort of distinguishes us from other kinds of things? And so then it becomes important to question whether or not machines could ever be truly creative. So this image is generated using a program called Deep Dream. And the way it works, and I'm not going to pretend that I know much about computers or computer programming, because I don't, but my very basic understanding is that you teach the program to identify certain images, right? So in this case, the program was taught to identify images of dogs. And once it got really good at identifying images of dogs, you then reduce the salience required so that the machine starts to see dogs where, like, it's not clear if there are dogs there. And then you run an image through it a bunch of times, and it's going to start positing dogs where there are none. It's going to start seeing dogs where there are none. And after, I think, 50 iterations, this is what was produced. It started off as an image of 3 jellyfish, and now it's this kind of terrifying picture. This one especially freaks me out. I've got one more that I'm sorry. This was initially a picture of 3 men in a pool. So this is what comes out if you let a machine look for things that maybe aren't there and combine things that weren't there before. So I think one interesting question is, is this an example of creativity? And there are other instances where we might want to argue about whether or not machines are being creative, when they play games, when they seem to put new ideas together, when they produce lyrics. Unfortunately, I can't answer that for you, but I do want to say that if machines can be creative, then that means they have a lot of other features that we normally think of as being inherently human, and especially human. Because it seems like in order to be creative, you need to have intentionality. You need to be able to have thoughts about something, because it's not random. You need to be able to form judgments, and you might need to be conscious. So if machines are truly creative, then that's going to bring with it a lot of other baggage about what machines are capable of. Okay. So I'm going to turn things over to Frank now. I'll pop in a few times with a few more remarks. But now that we have this sort of tentative definition in our pockets, we can turn to looking at what cognitive scientists and brain scientists have to say.
Thank you very much, Jen. This is on. Good. I'm Frank Connolly. Like Jen, I am a senior editor here at MindEdge. And for reasons known only to Jeff Flanders, I am going to be talking to you about the neuroscience of creativity. My MindEdge colleagues will be stunned to realize that I'm not actually a neuroscientist. Well, I had you fooled, Dan Picard, I really did. But I have, over the course of the last few weeks, spoken with several neuroscientists, and they are, as we say in these parts, they're wicked smart. And they are, a couple of them have agreed to contribute to this discussion through the magic of video. So we've heard from Jen the philosophical definitions of creativity. We're going to go to these two neuroscientists to offer not competing but complementary definitions of creativity that can serve as a jumping off point for our discussion of how the brain engages in what they call creativity or creative cognition. So first we're going to hear from Johann John, who is a computational neuroscientist at Boston University.
Yeah, my dad was in the advertising industry in Bombay in the 1970s, and he started out as a copywriter, and so he was very much involved in that world of creativity and coming up with new slogans and campaigns. So he was at a Reader's Digest meeting for ad execs in Bombay, and there was a competition for the best definition of creativity. And so when the mic came around to him, he said something to the effect of, creativity involves bringing together two disparate ideas to produce a new one. And apparently that was the prize-winning definition. And it ties in quite nicely with, so I guess most people will think of creativity in terms of just something new and something out of blue sky creativity, novelty. And that's definitely a part of it, but it's almost like it doesn't tell you how to go about it or what ingredients you need to be creative. And so it comes into, well, sort of laying out a set of possible links and then picking things that might initially not seem to be too related and then putting them together. Which is why I like the concept of alchemy to talk about creativity, because you put things together to get something qualitatively different from the combination.
Scientist is Rex Young, who is an assistant professor of neurosurgery at the University of New Mexico, and someone who has studied creativity as well as intelligence extensively. And I'll warn you, Rex comes to us through the magic of Skype, so his video is a little bit fuzzy, but I can assure you that his thinking is not. It's very clear. And this is his take on creativity.
That's an definition of creativity comes to us from Stein in the 1950s, which is something that is both novel and useful. I like that dichotomy because it creates a tension in the brain, the novelty generation portion of creativity and then the utility portion. So these are kind of diametrically opposed. You can have the novel things that are useless, and you can have useful things that are not very novel. So there is this kind of sweet spot that approaches novelty on the one hand and then utility on the other that I think is really the sweet spot of creativity.
We tend to associate creativity in common discussion, probably most often with the arts and the sciences, but creativity is obviously vitally important in almost any field of endeavor, including business. neurocoaching is a form of business coaching that applies principles of neuroscience to the psychology of coaching to encourage positive behavioral changes, including improved creativity. In this video, Sarah Scala, who is an executive coach and leadership consultant and a member of our audience, is going to explain the connection between compassionate coaching, positive emotional attractors, and the increase in creativity.
My research has really focused on the difference between compassion-based coaching versus compliance-based coaching. And a lot of the data is coming out of Case Western Reserve University, Weatherhead School of Business, under Dr. Richard Boyatzis. And they've been doing some really neat work where they're trying different approaches to coaching. So when I talk about compassion-based coaching, although compassion is sort of a warm and fuzzy kind of a word, it simply means that as the coach, we are triggering and focused on the coachee or the employee's hopes and dreams and visions, where when we're taking a compliance approach, yes, we're focused on problems, what might be going wrong, the organization's goals, and what tasks that they need to focus on. And so by playing or using those different approaches, we're going to trigger a different response with the participant, and also there's different things happening in the brain, which is pretty fascinating. And again, not a neuroscientist by any means, just a coach who's fascinated with what's going on in our heads. Want to certainly be clear about that, but Dr. Boyatzis, along with Dr. Jack, who's a cognitive behavioral scientist, PhD, at Case Western, are doing research where they're having students have experiences being coached or counseled in a way that triggers the positive emotional attractor through a compassion-based coaching approach focused on dreams, vision, and what's going on in their brain. So the visual cortex is much more active during that point, during fMRIs. When they do the research and they use a compliance-based coaching process, different parts of the brain are lighting up, and what they're finding is the part of the brain that's tied to long-term learning doesn't really have that many flashes or that much activity. Again, we're fairly new in the research, especially with the fMRIs, probably in the past 7 or 8 years. But the fact that we can see that difference in an fMRI helps to really bring some science to the psychological approaches of coaching. In closing, I think it's important to prompt creativity and help support an environment for creativity. The more we can use compassion-based coaching, trigger the positive emotional attractor, the parasympathetic nervous system, the better off we're going to be, because when people are in that place focused on the positive parts of life, they're more likely to take risks, they're more willing to experiment, they're more willing to test things and give it a try, as opposed to the compliance-based coaching, which builds defensiveness, and people shut down, it feels less safe, and they're less willing to try new things. So the more we want to prompt creativity, the more we need to look at these approaches for coaching, where obviously we need some negative attractor because we want things to get done, but how we support that with the positive approach or the compassion-based approach is very important.
Now, Sarah spoke briefly in that clip about parts of the brain lighting up. Sounds kind of scary in some ways, but she mentioned specifically the functional MRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging. And Johann John is going to explain the process a bit and point out that while it is a general indicator of brain activity, it's not an exact picture.
Yeah, it's a hallmark of, I guess, any newspaper nowadays will show you a pretty picture of the brain with lots of colors, and people will talk about such and such area of the brain lighting up, the amygdala, or some part of the prefrontal cortex. So what does that mean? So this technique, functional magnetic resonance imaging, uses magnets, magnetic fields, to measure the level of oxygenated blood in the brain, and that serves as a kind of a proxy for how much activity, and when we say activity, we mean like electrical activity. So spikes, you may have seen these little sharp signals, and those are changes in voltage in individual neurons. Now, fMRI can't measure individual neurons. It kind of takes an average of the energy consumption in a region, maybe a millimeter or 2 millimeters squared, because in order to generate these neural signals, the neurons use energy, and that energy is ultimately related to the oxygen consumption. So there's this bold signal, and that's what fMRI measures. It's the blood oxygen level dependent signal. So the metaphor I like is that it's sort of like dropping down a microphone into a stadium to kind of get a sense of what the crowd is saying. You get a rough picture, but not individual conversations. And those individual conversations are one neuron signaling to another one. But you get a general sense of, how excited the crowd is, for instance, or, if they're losing, they might be very quiet. If the home team's losing. So that's what fMRI does. And the F stands for functional, because what you generally do is get a person in the scanner to maybe do one thing and then do something kind of different. And there's not a whole lot they can do in that scanner other than like press a button. So it might be identify a face versus identify a house. And then what you can do is you compare the signal in the task 1 to the signal in task 2, and you can be like, oh, for faces it's only this region that's sensitive, and for houses it's this other one.
Now, for many, many years, there's been a popular idea about the right brain, left brain dichotomy. The right brain is the creative part of the brain, and the left brain is the logical, linear part of the brain. It turns out that there's a grain of truth in this popular idea, but really only a grain. And Rex Young is going to explain now why the left brain, right brain concept is not quite accurate.
Yeah, it's not only not quite accurate, it's completely wrong. But it takes your whole brain to be creative. It takes your whole brain to be intelligent. But there are certain parts of the brain that are active or less active at different times of the creative process, different times of the intelligence process. And the right brain conundrum that we still fight against really sprung up at the advent of split brain patients. Two researchers, Ferry and Gazaniga, did research with patients undergoing brain surgery to help with epilepsy, and they discovered that the two hemispheres of the brain function differently and rather independently of one another when you severed the connections of the two hemispheres, and that the left brain was somewhat more logical and analytical, and language was localized in the left hemisphere, and the right hemisphere was more synthetic and nonverbal and visual spatial, and that maybe some artistic elements resided in the right hemisphere more than the left. But I guarantee you that removing major portions of your left hemisphere will leave you less creative or have less tools in your toolbox to be creative. You really need math and reading and language and all of those major elements to be creative with, and without your left hemisphere, most of those go away. You need many elements from your right hemisphere. You need lots of brain to do creative things, which is at the apex of human endeavors. So it takes a lot of brain structure and a lot of brain function from both left and right hemispheres to do the creative thing.
I wanted to mention another myth that sometimes comes up when thinking about creativity that will lead us into the different kinds of networks that are likely involved. And it's the idea that conscious thought inhibits creativity or is a barrier to creativity. And one way that this attitude manifests is the way that we think about how sometimes artists will engage in drug use in order to quiet their conscious minds, their executive thought, and sort of tap into something subconscious or unconscious. But there is reason to think that the conscious mind is not only involved but necessary for creative thought. So some studies have shown that when you induce cognitive load, right, so one way that you try to quiet conscious thought is you give it something to do, like remember a number or try to pick out words in a song. When you induce load and you have people do those kinds of activities to keep their conscious minds occupied, they seem to be less creative, even if they're doing something that they're very practiced at doing, like improvising with a musical instrument or creating a picture. So unbiased judges tend to rate the pictures drawn by folks who have this cognitive load induced and have their conscious thought occupied as being less creative than people who have the tools available for both the conscious parts of their mind and the unconscious parts.
Now, creativity is there's a general consensus in the scientific community that creativity involves the work of three different networks, parts of the brain, which are scattered all throughout the brain, but which work together in the process of creative cognition. Together, these three networks, and known as the executive network, also called the cognitive control network or the task-on network, and then the default mode network, sometimes called the intelligence network, and then the salience network. These three networks make up about 75% of the brain. So, and for starters, that could show us that the right brain thing isn't going to work because that's only 50%. So, I mean, I did that math myself. So now Rex Young is going to explain how these networks work together during the process of creative cognition.
As we have, over the last 10 years started to kind of disentangle what parts of the brain were working when in the creative process, we started to really reveal three major brain networks that were working in tandem. They comprise, 75% of the brain. So it's really a major territory of the brain that we're talking about. But the default mode network is more of that novelty generation element of creative cognition, where you are more internally focused and thinking, doing imaginative work, or thinking about your relationships, thinking about the future, doing perspective thinking. That default mode network is really engaged in putting pieces, elements of things together in novel ways that might not have been looked at before. The cognitive control network is really involved in down selecting the best idea, the usefulness of that idea, and then refining that idea over time, and it is overlapping significantly with the intelligence network, so that really you are trying to make the best choice that might be best to push out into the world. And then the salience network is kind of a very affectively laden or feeling laden network that is involved in how these interact with each other. And I think there is some switching back and forth, or seesawing, if you will, or blending of these networks during the creative process, where the salience networks helps to integrate the work of the novelty generation versus the down selecting in real time. So these three networks that, again, comprise almost 75% of the brain would be integral to that novelty useful dichotomy.
I hope you got all that, because there will be a quiz at the end. Now, Johan John is going to do a very brief description of how parts of the brain are connected, because one of the key points here, and Rex Young talked about it, is a big part of creativity is forming connections between different ideas, which are really stored as memories in the brain. And therefore, the connections that exist within the brain help to facilitate these connections that in turn give rise to creative thought. So Johan has a brief description of how all this brain stuff works.
So I guess a lot of kids have seen a diagram of a neuron in their school textbooks. There's a cell. It's a cell just like every other cell in the animal kingdom. It has a cell membrane, but the difference is that the membrane is branched and quite complicated. So you have a long axon coming out of the cell, and that's the sort of output, the mouth of the neuron, if you will, that makes contact with other neurons. And on the other end, you have the cell body, and it sends out maybe one or more dendrites, that means tree-like. So they're branching structures, and those are like the ears of a neuron, that's where the axons of other neurons make contacts. And those contacts are called synapses. And most of what we call neuroplasticity or neural plasticity involves, or the best studied form of neural plasticity involves modification of those synapses. So that could be strengthening or weakening. And you need both, because if you just strengthen everything, it's kind of a recipe for epilepsy. If you have too much activity, you kind of get a positive feedback loop of things getting louder and louder. Anyone who's held a mic next to a speaker knows what that's like. So you want, so both the increases and decreases are useful. So it's not simply a matter of strengthening connections in order to do better, but also getting rid of ones that might be irrelevant for this particular task. So it's almost like that learning and training and practice involve sharpening and tweaking and making your connections refined. Well, there's this concept of small world networks, which are not like everything's connected to everything else, but you have a few choice long-range connections, and that can help you make these big jumps. So what you want is not so much strong connections, but occasionally the ability to make big jumps, and that may involve the axons, but it may also involve disinhibiting. So it's almost like the connections are there for everyone, but they need to learn techniques to unblock certain constraints that they've put. I like to think of it in terms of like during the day you have certain narrow focuses, so you probably won't make an inappropriate joke even if you hear a certain word that at night you would make the same joke with your buddies. So there's something that keeps certain types of associations or ideas tamped down, but then they run away once you're, and it can happen because not just because you're at home with or at a bar with your buddies, but if you're tired or if someone catches you in a weird moment, you might say something that you might not otherwise. And it might not seem obvious initially, but this is related to creativity, because like all these little practices that people do of various sorts, and even having a drink, all these things are to literally and metaphorically disinhibit yourself to kind of get the signals flowing.
For finally explaining why I will make inappropriate jokes after several beers in a bar with my friends. Hey honey, I just downregulated my hippocampus. It's all. Neuroscientists have identified 4 key stages of creativity. And we can see them up there in no sequence. But the preparation phase is simply the learning about a topic area, an issue, learning as much as you can, and maybe thinking about the problem or the issue. But I know it happens with me a lot, and I think it happens with a lot of folks. Sometimes you get stumped, and you research this problem, you've thought about which side, you can't get an answer to it. And very often, what helps is to step away from it, to do something else, to take a nap, to take a run, and that. Brain scientists would refer to this as the process of incubation, because the brain is still active while you're deliberately not thinking about that issue, and it's still looking for associations within its core memories. But you're stepping away from it and let that default mode network, if you will, sort of range free without being restrained quite so much by the other networks in the brain. And that, with any luck, leads to the third process, which is illumination, the aha moment, the eureka moment. And then finally, there is the process of verification, which is the process of, okay, I've got this really original idea. Is it useful? Is it practical? Can we figure out a way to make it work? Okay. And different parts of the brain are involved in different parts of this process. The cognitive control network is more active during the preparation and verification phases, and the default mode network is more involved in the incubation and illumination stages. And as Rexina mentioned, the science network sort of allows the brain to toggle between back and forth between these phases. Now, creativity, and we're kind of getting into the part here where it gets interesting but kind of funky. Creativity occurs when the brain isn't preoccupied with complex tasks, or a great deal of creativity does, and it's free to sort of wander or free to associate. And this condition has a lot of different names, or has been cited in different contexts. I mean, jazz musicians, rappers, and athletes talk about being in the flow. it's a period where they can really are at their best and free to improvise. And in fact, there's been a lot of creativity research that focuses on jazz musicians, rappers in particular. Rex mentioned that a little bit later on. Nancy Andreessen, who is a prominent neuroscientist at the University of Iowa and also a former professor of literature there. She's a pretty amazing person. She talks about, she has studied and written about the brain process during a phase she calls rest, which is random episodic silent thought. But she's quick to point out that what she calls rest, James Joyce called stream of consciousness, and a lot of other authors have embraced the stream of consciousness. So, and then finally, Arne Dietrich of the American University in Beirut coined the phrase, and this really is one of my favorites, transient hypofrontality. And it's kind of the same name for what we're talking about here. It refers to the prefrontal cortex sort of becoming less active. That's a part of the brain that's associated with very rational linear logical thought. Less activity there, and allowing more activity in the parts of the brain that are associated with memory, episodic thought, etc. So, Rex Young will explain especially hypofrontality.
There's some evidence to suggest that. They've done research with improvisational musicians, rap artists, and jazz artists, and in fMRI studies, you see some downregulation in the cognitive control network when people are in that flow state, or that improvising state that musicians can do when they are in the groove or in the mode of improvising. And you can see that the default mode network, at least in brain imaging studies, is more active, and the cognitive control network, the downregulation thing, is less active. So there's some evidence to suggest that there is a lessening or a dampening of the brakes of the frontal lobes, at least in that flow state where improvisers or jazz improvisers and rap improvisers work. So there's some compelling evidence of this back and forth of these networks in that particular design, that particular cohort, that I think might work with other groups as well. You can imagine that this analogy can hold true when people are in the shower and thinking up all their great ideas, or in a dream, in a reverie, and all your ideas seem a little better than reality. But when you wake up, it's like, oh, that's a silly idea. That'll never work. So there's a downregulation of the filters that otherwise would be in place during those flow states, or those less inhibited states. I think transient hypofrontality is related to that flow state where the brakes are off the system and the error checkers are sent away momentarily, where you are generating creative output, and the novelty generators are at their maximum, and the error checkers are at their minimum. So that transient hypofrontality is transient by nature, but it feels good to have all your ideas be good and feel good in that flow state.
Now, neuroscientists, again, think of creativity as a time when the brain is making associations between different concepts, different ideas, and these concepts and ideas, in turn, are stored in the form of memories. And Johann John explains that connection.
The human memory is very different from computer memory. So, when we store a memory, it doesn't just sit in its own little slot like a book on a bookshelf. It interacts with other memories that are nearby. And when I say nearby, I mean similar memories that have something in common. And we call that, and they form links with things that are similar as well as things that are happening at the same time. So, the links with things that are happening at roughly the same time, that's called associative memory. I think most people are familiar with that. And then the links with similar things, which could have happened a long time ago, that's called content addressable memory, and that's not as well known. But content addressable memory allows you to when you hear one song, come up with a similar song, or a song within the same genre, or a song by the same artist, or a song with the same lyrics. And it takes very little effort for us to do things like this. It just sort of is part and parcel of the memory, so that if I experience one thing, a similar things kind of crop up. And depending on how focused you are on a narrow goal versus a broad goal, your ability to free associate to vaguely linked things kind of can be narrow or quite broad. And this relates to creativity even of the sort that you have in jokes and puns, because these things involve making a reference to something that's sort of related or based on a different usage of a word, or even just an image or a situation. And that involves a strong pattern matching ability. And those patterns are in your memory.
Now, one popular method of trying to enhance people's creativity, of course, is brainstorming, very popular in business and academia. Putting a group of people in a room and telling them, come be brilliant, come up with some good ideas. And does it work? Brainstorming sessions do generally produce ideas, but not the most creative ones. And Rex Young will explain why.
Some of the best evidence that we have shows that that type of activity inhibits creativity more than it facilitates it. That people, the social pressures to conform really force people to suppress expression of ideas in that group setting. It's just kind of human nature, or monkey nature, I guess, to try to fit in, to go along, to get along. And that some of the most creative ideas, the ones that deviate from the norm, the so-called outside of the box ideas, are going to be socially unacceptable at some level and non-conforming by definition. So the group idea will inevitably be less creative than if each individual had thought up their most creative idea and then brought it to the group that then, voted on the most creative idea, because those ideas would otherwise be inhibited in a group setting.
I love this quote from Vincent Walsh. There's no relationship between IQ and creativity. There's much greater relationship between obsession and creativity. And when he's talking about obsession, he really means, sort of relates to that preparation phase, finding out everything you can and becoming intimately familiar with this subject, this problem, this issue. And it speaks to developing a depth of knowledge about a particular, and deep knowledge results in more memories, more pieces that can be associated. So, there are a couple of very interesting questions here. One is, how is creativity different from intelligence? Because very often we tend to associate the same thing, but Walsh says, for instance, there's no relationship, and most neuroscientists would agree with that there's no strong relationship. And Rex Young will explain, because he has written extensively on both topics.
There are overlaps of intelligence and creativity, and some differences. I look at intelligence as rapid and accurate problem solving. It's very highly adaptive brain features that animals and human animals, and lower animals, and perhaps even bacterium possess to solve environmental problems rapidly, yet accurately. So if you don't go too fast, you might start making mistakes, and then if you really focus on making accurate responses, it really slows you down. So again, that sweet spot of rapid and accurate response solving is kind of the sweet spot of intelligence. That has some overlap with creativity. You want to produce things somewhat rapidly and have some accuracy, but you can see that the push towards novel and useful problem solving is a somewhat different problem space than rapid and accurate problem solving. I look at creativity as relatively low probability problems that come up in the environment. So, the 100-year flood, or the earthquake, or the end of a long relationship, or the drought. What are we going to do now? Crap, things have really hit the fan. That really adaptive problem that is very low frequency, but yet in our everyday lives we are also doing novel and useful problem solving at a lower level.
Let me just find my place here. It's important to remember that creativity, even genius, is more than just a process. It does not take place in a vacuum. You know, I think I forgot the part about genius. Rex Young is going to explain the difference between everyday creativity and actual genius. And as a bonus question, I want you all to try and figure out what is Rex's favorite sport.
LeBron James certainly is a genius in his domain, and you can probably find the so-called 1 in 10,000 or 1 in a million person in each field. They're relatively rare, but there's someone that has incredible. In my conception, and I've done some thinking about this, it's someone who has both incredible intelligence and incredible creativity in that particular domain. So someone that has rapid and accurate problem solving, LeBron would certainly qualify in that domain. And someone who has novel and useful problem solving, LeBron certainly qualifies in that domain. So that incredible combination, usually most of us either get some dose of intelligence or some dose of creativity, and but all of us are both somewhat intelligent and somewhat creative. That's part of being human. We have those capacities, but we get more or less of each, just as we get more height and less hair or something like that.
I'm familiar with that part, the less hair part.
Present company excluded. So you know, it's like we get different physical capacities, and we get different mental capacities in different degrees. But I think the genius is so rare because it's just exceptional intelligence, exceptional creativity in a particular domain, and that's why it's so rare. Is you get a double dose of both of those.
Now, as we said before, the genius, creativity, even genius, is not simply a process. It requires, it doesn't take place in a vacuum. It requires, if you will, raw materials, facts, knowledge, and memories, as Johann John
Definitely there are people who can come at a situation who are unburdened by too much history, because there's a double-edged sword to knowledge, because sometimes you are overly biased towards what's possible versus impossible. So that can happen with a lot of knowledge, but at the same time, well, right now, for instance, in education, there's a bit of a fashion for saying that, well, you don't need memory, you just need critical reasoning skills or just logic or something of that sort. And definitely you can get a long way if you are good at logic. But a friend of mine at MIT, a research scientist there, he says, well, how can you have critical, you need some raw material for the critical reasoning. So that's where the memory comes in, and then the background knowledge. So you've kind of, it's almost like sort of fertilized the field and so planted seeds of things that could be relevant to making connections.
Now, another central question is, are there different kinds of creativity? Is scientific creativity different from literary creativity? Is creativity on the concert stage different from creativity on the basketball court? Rex Young says that the basic brain processes that lead to creative ideas are the same in everyone. But those creative ideas then have to get expressed through different domains of the brain, depending on the type of activity. An athlete's creativity is specific to the domain of the brain that controls motor functions, usually. A musician's might be central to the domain that controls manual dexterity for playing an instrument, for instance. But as always, he's going to explain it better than me.
I'm convinced that this creative thing that we do is probably a central brain attribute, and that there is domain specificity around that central brain attribute. So the novelty generation and down selection, we talked about these different brain networks, is probably common across entrepreneurs and poets and basketball, you know, Michael Jordans of the world. LeBron James would be a more topical LeBron James of the world. But there's some domain specificity. So if you're a basketball player, if you're LeBron James, you're really going to be pulling from some domain specificity residing in the motor cortex and the cerebellum and lots of wonderful motor domain specificity. Same with musicians. You're going to have some very highly developed motor specificity and motor talent in your hands and fingers and whatnot if you play a musical instrument. If you're an entrepreneur, it's going to be a bit more diffuse, where you are more extroverted and more risk-taking, and some personality variables and some more ethereal types of variables that come to play. If you're a scientist, you really have to know about the scientific method, and you have to know how to be a bit risky in your question asking and inquiry of how the world works to find something that is novel, because a lot of stuff has been, worked to death in the scientific field. So to find something truly novel, you have to look under some different rocks.
Creativity involves picking the right rocks. Another central question is, are some people naturally more creative than others? And that's really just another way of asking, is creativity genetically determined? Rex Young says the answer is a little bit yes.
Well, there's genetic component to everything. There's genetic component to your height and your hair and probably your creativity. We know that with intelligence, about half of your intelligence is genetically determined, about half of it is environmentally determined. So the same would be true of creativity, that about half of it would be genetically determined. This novelty generation, utility, some people are going to be more or less better at that based on what their parents gave them from their genes, and the other half is going to come from environmental influences, what they are able to develop over time. So I think that our best starting estimate for any contribution of heritability is about 50%.
Now we come to maybe the money question for those of us as educators, which is how can we be more creative? And I think we lost a little text there. I'm sorry, but there we go. There are three sort of key elements. One is expanding your base of knowledge. Again, the more raw materials you have in your brain, the more memories that relate to concepts, the more raw material you have to work with. Another is to simply be open to randomness. Divergent thinking is pretty much by definition a random activity. And if you are too rigidly structured in your approach, or if we as educators are too rigidly structured in our approach to students, then there's going to be an inhibiting effect on creativity. And finally, you've got to know how to get into the flow, into that hypofrontality that we talked about earlier. And so Rex Young is going to try and answer the question, are there 5 ways to become more creative?
Most people know what the space that they need to be more creative and how they are creative. Some people like a warm bath. Some people like a long walk. Some people need it very noisy and go to a cafe where there's a cacophony of activity around them, and they can be creative in that. Some people need it absolutely quiet. It's different for different people. Creative people know what works for them. That does not mean that it will work for you, because people are as different as the faces that adorn our bodies. So it people need to find what works for them and do more of that. For me, the joke I have is I have a large lawn, almost an acre of lawn that I mow, and some of my best ideas come when I'm mowing the lawn. I discovered kind of by accident that repetitive activity of going back and forth and letting my mind wander while I'm just mowing the lawn, I'm just thinking about lots of different crazy things. And my body is engaged in a repetitive activity, but my mind gets to roam free. And I just came across that by happenstance, and I can't mow my lawn every day, but I do know that that's a good time for me to kind of let my mind wander and see if a creative idea emerges. So we know that getting out of your regular routine can help see things differently and see ideas differently. Travel helps spur creative ideas because you're by definition out of your comfort zone, seeing things slightly differently. So, I mean, there's suggestions and books of the last chapter is by definition supposed to be the 10 ideas that will make you more creative, but all of those books are flawed because we just don't know. And it is individual differences will rule, and people have to find their own muse, if you will, to see what helps them. And if something doesn't work, try something different.
We are coming to the end, I promise. But I like that advice of his, which is find what works and do more of that. I think that's valuable advice in almost any line of endeavor. Just gonna leave with 3 thoughts about what these. What the research on the neuroscience of creativity might suggest to us as educators. And look, the science is unsettled, so there's no hard and fast conclusions here, but I think that there are some questions that we might want to think about. First, we saw a lot of talk during this discussion about finding ways to make associations, sometimes often novel associations between different ideas that we have. And there's research by Nancy Andreessen, who I mentioned earlier. She has looked at polymaths, people who have deep knowledge or ability in many different fields, or several different fields. And she sees a definite correlation between creativity and being a polymath, being really just having a broad base of knowledge. So again, it's sort of what we talked about earlier, expand your base of knowledge. You don't necessarily have to get a license as a polymath, but the more stuff you know, and in particular, the more broadly your knowledge is distributed, the more likely it is that your brain can find some sort of novel association. So what does that say for education? If we want to spur creativity, it would seem that early specialization and tracking of kids might not be the way to do it. We might need to rethink the way we narrow the educational path for kids at a relatively early age these days. The second point is the question of testing. And it's a controversial political topic. I'm not going to get into that, but I do want to say that standardized testing that a lot of states, most states and the federal government are relying on to a greater extent and have done so for the last 20 years, it measures and it rewards convergent thinking, get to the right answer. And convergent thinking is important. And it's appropriate that we would test for that. But as we've seen, in many areas there's become a real over-reliance on standardized testing. And if that over-reliance on standardized testing and convergent thinking is crowding out divergent thinking and the ways in which educators can encourage their students, their learners, to think divergently and be more creative, then again, that's something that is something we need to think about if we really are serious about trying to increase creativity. And the final thought is simply about the sort of the priorities that we give to academic subjects. I think there's an unofficial hierarchy, particularly in grammar school and high school, and science and math are at the top. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Science and math are important. Science and math are also kind of easy to measure and easy to test for. And then reading and language arts is also very high, also very important, and also something that we test for a lot. Then maybe the humanities, history, etc., a little lower, but at the bottom, almost always, is music and art. And I'm not just saying that. I mean, I can show it to you if you want. If you look at least here in Massachusetts, and I would wager in every state in the country, when budgets get tight, local school districts need to cut, and the first thing they cut is music and art. And even when times aren't so tight, the way they approach music and art, they are, my son's school, they call them specials, right? You do it once a week. You don't do it every day. You don't get graded for it. And not that grading is essential, but they're treated as something different than the other subjects and something sort of innately lesser. Now, if we as a society or if we as educators want to make a judgment that those subjects really are lesser and should be receive less emphasis than science, math, etc., then that's fine. But let's be aware of the judgment that we're making, and that what we're doing specifically is removing some of the most important creative outlets that young kids can have. So again, if you want to look at the brain science, the three things. It's rethink tracking, or at least think about tracking and specialization, think about standardized testing, and thinking about the different priorities that we place on music and art compared to other subjects. So that's all I got.
Welcome back to MindEdge's LINK Symposium. We are now going to turn to Chris Colbert from the Harvard Innovation Lab. And I'm not going to give a long introduction. I think you'll find Chris is one of the more imaginative and energetic thinkers around. Chris.
He has a very low bar. Thank you, Jeffrey. Jefferson. So two things. I have a little cold thing. I'm not contagious, but I apologize for my voice, and I may choke every now and then. The second thing is, segueing from Frank's very compelling talk about creativity and the other guy, I forget his name, that whole question about like how to become more creative, how many of you think you are creative? Raise your hand. Okay, rest of you, cut the crap. No. I'm actually completely serious. It's not about like, I'm going to expose myself to more stuff to become more creative. The first order of business is you deciding or you realizing that you actually are creative. If you deny that you're creative, all the things that Frank suggested you do won't work. So just sit with that for a second. Okay, so Jeff asked me to talk today about my translation, how do you bridge from creativity to innovation, and then from my addition to that to successful innovation, because one of the things that I have realized in my work at Harvard is that all innovation is not necessarily successful innovation. So I am going to talk to that. But before I talk to that, I want to spend a little bit of time underscoring why innovation, which may sound obvious, self-evident, but for a lot of people it isn't. And so I just want to, if you would just bear with me for about 15 minutes, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what, and then we're going to get into what Jeff asked me to talk about, which is how. So the why piece is, I think, best, well, let me tell you a story. Last Sunday night, my wife, Kate, and I went out to dinner with 3 friends in the North End, which, if you're not from Boston, is our Italian section, I guess. Sunday night, and about 15, and we were sort of sitting at a table like this, and I'm pretending you're Kate, and about 15 minutes into the dinner, Kate looks at me and does this. And I'm being relatively intelligent, not genius level, but relatively intelligent. I translate that into shut the hell up. Whereupon I became a young child and completely shut the hell up. Didn't say another word for another hour. Eventually dinner's over. We walk home. We lived downtown. And I'm like, what was that all about? And she says, just sometimes you're too energetic. And sometimes you have too much to say. And sometimes you have so many questions. Whereupon I like blew up. We were standing on the Greenway. You know the Greenway in downtown Boston? We were literally standing on the sidewalk screaming at each other. And ultimately, don't worry, we love each other madly. We're fine. Everything's fine. We have one of those relationships, you know. And anyway, the end of it is, by the way, nice shoes. The end of it is, I finally say to her, listen, I'm totally okay with the energy comment. I'm totally okay with the I have too much to say comment. And sometimes I agree with that. I have too much to say. But you know what I'm not okay with? I am not okay with the incessant question comment. The criticism of me as having too many questions. Too many questions. Oh. Malfunction, all right, hold on. There we go. Because I believe, and I think those educators or just generally intelligent people in the room and online, wherever you are, you already understand that the question is the root of all learning. You know that, right? The question is the root of all achievement. And the question is the root of all innovation. And in today's world, I believe we need questioning and innovation more than we have ever needed it before. And my sort of terrible view is this, that the status quo of the world today blows. That the status quo is unacceptable, that standing still is unacceptable, that we will die if we stand still. We will die if we do not innovate. And when I talk about the we, I'm talking about every layer of the equation. And I'm going to take you through, very quickly, every layer of the equation. In order to do that, I need to give each of you an imaginary set of binoculars. So look under your chair. So I actually did this talk at Harvard a couple weeks ago, and I said, look under your chair, and like half the audience looked under their chair. This is Harvard.
I don't feel so bad.
Yeah, there you go. So pick up your binoculars, and let's look at this thing. What do you see? Come on, help me out here. Earth. There's a little cheat sheet in the corner. For those non-geniuses, there you go. What I see is a planet that is not evolving, it's devolving, due primarily to mankind. And if we don't innovate it, we are out of business, right? And as an example, there's this. How many of you have heard of the Pacific Garbage Vortex? Very good. So you're aware that there's this thing in the Pacific Ocean, duh, that is the size of the state of Texas, that consists of 1.3 trillion pieces of trash. Crazy. Like, just sit with that, right? The state of Texas. Turns out there's one very similar in the Atlantic Ocean, and there's another very similar in, I believe, the Indian Ocean, or somebody correct me if I'm wrong there. There's a third one somewhere out there. We're killing the planet. And absent innovation, we will kill ourselves. The good news is there's this kid, and I say kid because he's 24 years old, and he started when he was 17. It looks like you've read the story. I think his name's Derek, and I think he's from Denmark, who's been working on solving the problem for 7 years, of his own volition, his own whatever. And he actually has invented this thing behind me, which is a 2,000-foot-long boom that they're actually towing out to the Pacific trash vortex as we speak to solve the problem. Do you have something to say? No. So the good news is innovation might just save the planet. The next layer down, if you take a look at your binoculars, you got your binoculars? Somebody has binoculars. Look at it again. If you drill down a little further, you see nation states, you see countries, and in some cases you see empires. And the interesting thing about empires is that they do this. They collapse. They rise and they fall. Every time. There's not one empire that was ever established in the history of mankind that didn't collapse, didn't fall. And the reason why is because they stopped innovating. The reason why is because hubris took over. The reason why is because they thought their poopy didn't stink. They thought they had figured it all out. And the minute any of us, at a country, at an individual, at a community, the minute any of us think we've got it all figured out is the beginning of the end of us. So let's look again. What do you see? City. So here's another story. Kate and I, 3 weekends ago, were in Lowell, Massachusetts. Anybody been to Lowell? How many Lowells? So we went up for something called the Kinetic Sculpture Road Race, which is this like crazy thing that I won't explain, but it's really fun. They do it every year. And we're walking around the city on a Sunday, and I start reading about it a little bit. And so it turned out in 1835, Lowell was the #1 industrial technology city in the world. Like ahead on so many fronts, primarily in the textile space, but other spaces too, manufacturing, all sorts of stuff. And 30 years later, Lowell was effectively out of business. They went from #1 to #0 in 30 short years. The reason why? They stopped innovating. Just like the nation states, they stopped innovating. Go one layer down. What do you see? A company. And the crazy thing about this, when I started thinking about what examples I wanted to use, there are many. There are many. including even churches or religions, I don't know. And the one I picked is a company called RIM and a product called BlackBerry. So for the young people in the room, no. 2009, this company owned 24% global share of the smartphone market. 2009. 2014, they owned 2.5%. 2018, they own 0.1%. Oh my God. The reason? All the reasons already stated. They stopped innovating. One layer down, what's this one? Sarah. So this is Sarah. Sarah is a software engineer. She works in Chelmsford, Massachusetts for a robotics company. She has a lovely apartment in Littleton, Massachusetts. She's very happy. She has a little dog named Pookie. By the way, none of that's true. I just made that up. But it could be true. And the wonderful thing, she has a great job. The not so wonderful thing is the rate of technological change is such that if Sarah doesn't increase her technical abilities significantly every year, 25% of her capacity to create value diminishes every year. So in 4 years, she will be unemployable. If she does not innovate herself through continuing education, through keeping up with the latest technologies, she will go from having a great job to having no job in 4 years. And then the last layer of this thing, and I apologize as this is like a little too creepy personal, that's you. So here's the picture. You're at the end of your life, and you're looking at it through the lens of a movie, and the movie is called My Life. And the question is, when you get to the end of the movie, do you walk out, do you give yourself a standing ovation, and then do you walk out of the theater going, that was amazing. I loved every minute of it. The protagonist was incredible. The risk he or she took was crazy. The value they created for mankind was profound. I'm crying with joy. Or do you walk out of that theater going, what the fuck? My point here, your life is a choice in terms of being a creator, being an innovator, creating value for you, creating value for others. And this is going back to my question of like, who's creative in the room? You're all creative. In part because it's innate to you. I disagree with the gene guy. And secondly, because it has to be. In order to realize the full potential of your life and help the world save itself from itself, each of us have to step forward as innovators. If you want your movie to be good and you want the movie of the human species to be good, we must innovate, period. You buy that? Anybody buy that? Sure. Yeah. Okay, so now I should have started with this. Is, well, what exactly is innovation? And I don't have your stuff, Frank. I just have my stuff. So here's my very grossly simplified view. Well, the first question is, what's creativity? And this, I borrowed this from somebody, and I tried to source it last night because I stole it. But that's its own form of creativity. And I couldn't find it, so this is not mine. This is somebody else who's smarter than me, whatever. But I love this, right? Creativity is intelligence allowed to play. I love that. What's innovation? This is mine. This is my grossly simplified definition of what the hell this overused term innovation is. And it's really, really simple. The after serves us better than the before. Period. And if we look around us as humans, as we look around us as educators, we look around us as administrators, we look around us as whatever we are in society, what do we see? Nothing but opportunities to make things better. And that gets back to our responsibility and our opportunity to be innovators. The bridge provided by Theodore Levitt, who was an HBS professor for many years, is this. What is often lacking is not creativity in the idea-creating sense, but innovation in the action-producing sense, i.e. putting ideas to work. My qualifier to Ted, if I can call him Ted, I don't think he's with us anymore, putting ideas to work that are effective. I think there's this like naive view that all innovation is good innovation, and that is fundamentally not true. In fact, I hosted a talk the other night at Harvard called Technology, Innovation, and Public Purpose. Ash Carter, the prior Secretary of Defense, was on stage with me for probably an hour or so when we talked about the fundamental truth that a lot of technological innovation carries with it unintended consequences. So the short-term consequence may be positive, but the societal consequence may be negative. And that is also, I think, a responsibility we all share as members of the human race. Okay, so we got the why, we got the what, now the how. I have no idea. Good luck. Any questions? There's actually two lenses I want to look at this through with you. Back to the binos, I suppose. Left side will look outside in, right side will look inside out. So we've got to start here. The reason why I don't really know the how is because nobody really does. 95% of most innovation fails. 95% of startups fail. 95% of corporate innovation fails. 95% of new products fail. I mean, if we knew how, that would not be true, right? We just like do it that way and everything would be successful. So we don't know how. Nobody knows how. If they try to convince you they know how, they're full of shit. But we have many mechanisms. In fact, if you Google how to be innovative online, you know, Google it, you will literally get, I think, 7, hi. Hello. Come join us. You'll get like 7 million hits. You'll get 5 million frameworks. You'll get 3 gazillion YouTube videos from people like me trying to convince you that they know how. And they're all full of shit. Nobody knows how. This is like a design thinking thing. It looks pretty good, right? Discover, define, develop, deliver. I love alliteration. That must be how. Alliterate. In order to innovate, alliterate. Any questions? So, in all the work that we do at Harvard, I actually just left a strategic planning report out with my staff. And we have a strategic plan every fiscal year, and we're talking about our methodology in terms of working with innovators. And it boils down to one really important capability / philosophy / attribute, whatever, truth. And I'll explain what I mean. The three biggest boo-boos in innovating anything, and boo-boos is a technical term. For those that aren't aware of it, it means mistake. The 3 biggest boo-boos, here we go. Or maybe here we go. Maybe we don't go. Let's try again. Boo-boo number 1 carries 80% of the boo-boo-ishness. Swear to God. And we'll talk more about this in a second. The problem identified is actually not really the problem. Boo-boo number 2. This is a mind bender. The customer is actually a human, not a function. It's not a demographic. It's not a role. It's not a title. It's actually a human. And humans are icky, so we don't like to go there. And then boo-boo number 3, and we'll talk more about this one too. The innovation, woo-woo, that we invent. Look what we did. We made this thing. You're like, but that thing doesn't actually connect to the thing you said that you were trying to solve. Like, how'd that happen? So let's dive into these. Oops, sorry. The word, the attribute, the sensibility is this idea of truth. Truth of the problem. Truth. Truth. Truth of the problem, truth of the customer, truth of the solution. We as humans are remarkably capable of deluding ourselves about everything. Deluding ourselves about everything. I'm now going to pick on my sister. She's 65 years old and revealed to me 2 months ago. She went to Bryn Mawr College, highly educated, highly intelligent, much smarter than me. She revealed to me, sitting on her sofa 2 months ago, I don't have any money. I'm like, what? I don't have any savings. Like, well, you have a retirement plan? No, I never put any money away for retirement. Delusion. It is our specialty. We delude ourselves on so many fronts. Innovators are really good at deluding themselves into thinking they know what the problem is, they know what the customer is, and they know what the solution is when they don't. I want to give you a quick example of somebody that got to the truth of the problem. So a friend of mine, a guy named Mark Edwards, 4 years ago started a company called Upstream, a nonprofit, Upstream, with a friend of his, Peter. And their focus was trying to break the cycle of poverty. And instead of jumping to the symptoms of the cycle of poverty, Mark and Peter spent the first year, an entire year, not working on the solution, working on a diagnostic of the problem. And what they determined, they just kept going upstream. Like, there's a problem. Why is this a problem? Why is this happening? It's a problem because of this. Why is that happening? Why is that happening? Why is that happening? And what they determined is one of the major threads that causes or the perpetuation of the cycle of poverty are unplanned pregnancies. There are many primarily single women in the United States that end up having children that don't want children and are not prepared to have children and are certainly not economically equipped to have children. Okay? The reason why that is because 95% of the clinics in the United States prescribe the wrong form of contraception. They prescribe either condoms or the pill, both of which are not as effective as they should be. The IUD and the patch are far more effective. So Mark and Peter have built an organization that is working with clinics in various states around the country simply to help the clinics both prescribe the right contraception and provide the right contraception. The punchline of the story is, I think, because of the analysis of the root, getting to the root cause, going all the way upstream to the real problem. The symptom is the cycle of poverty. That's not the problem. Mark and Peter, in the last 12 months, have raised $250 million. Sit with that for a second. $250 million. Simply because they got to the truth of the problem. Okay, truth of the human. This is where we get icky. So anybody who's not comfortable with humans should probably leave for like 10 minutes and then come back. This is basic calculus. The adoption of any innovation requires the benefit to exceed the cost, right? We are ROI calculators, man. Every move we make, every move. You guys deciding to be here tonight, staff accepted. You really had no choice. Well, you did have a choice, but it could have been ugly. You all made an ROI calculation. Is it worth my time, right? Is it worth my time? Is it worth the money? But it's really not my money. It's the school's money, so who cares? But you did a calculation. This is what we do. What's interesting is we calculate in a number of different modalities, if you will. And there are these different relationships that exist. There's money to get money. So I spend money to make more money. That's called investing. I spend time at work to create time outside of work. That's called vacation. And then this third thing is around behaviors. So the example I use here is I decide to forego my need for ice cream. I really need ice cream. I really love ice cream. Because I seek to feel better about myself by looking better. And this is all about Maslow. How many know Maslow? Like, I'm a fan. I believe this is fundamentally true, that the vast majority of our actions are fueled by the hierarchy of need, and the vast majority of our needs are fundamentally primal. They're around safety and control and physiological stuff. So as an innovator, what I say to people is you need to understand this hierarchy, and you need to recognize that the vast majority of your customers are operating at that behavioral level. I'll give you an example. What problem does Uber solve? Anybody? Come on.
Point A to point B.
Point A to point B. Just like a cab. Yep. What else?
Not having to have a car.
Hmm?
Not having to buy a car.
Not having to buy a car. Just like a cab. Yep. What else?
You don't have to hail a cab down.
Don't have to hail a cab. Okay.
No cash needed.
What's that?
No cash.
No cash. Anybody else?
Security. Yeah,
Security. Tell me more about that, Jeff. What does that mean?
That means if my wife is going to take a Uber, I know there's a electronic trail. She's seen the driver. She's seen the license plate.
So let's go back to the hierarchy. Security is the first cousin of safety. I also believe that Uber gives us comfort. Uber puts us in control. How many are old enough to remember cabs? They're yellow. So this is my cab experience back when I was in my 20s and 30s. I started a business. It was moderately successful. We were like go-go kids, you know. And we had big meetings all the time. And we got to go to New York. And so I'd get up and I'd call the cab. 6 a.m. I got a 7 o'clock, you know, Eastern. Remember Eastern shuttle? Went out of business. Called the cab company. Yeah, what do you want? Can I get a cab to go to the Logan Airport? Yeah. And then you're standing on the curb waiting, and you're starting to sweat, you know, and you're like, wait, I should save the sweating for the client meeting. This is absurd. And no cab. And now it's like the flight's leaving in 40 minutes, and do you remember this?
So true.
There's no cab. And so you call the cab dispatch back, and you go, hey, and for some reason you're afraid to call them. Hi, I called 15 minutes ago for a cab. What do you want here? Okay. And back then you were connected to a landline. And then maybe the cab showed, maybe it didn't, and the cab company didn't care, and you know, there was no rating of anybody, and you know, it was, but the point is you felt completely out of control. So the profundity of Uber is it works on all three levels. It saves money, it saves time, and I think most importantly, it makes you feel better. It meets a fundamental physiological and safety need. And if you want to be a brilliant innovator, understand the levels of need. It's not all about money for money or time for time. All three of these things are going on. Like when you guys were calculating whether to come to this thing, it wasn't just about the money. It wasn't just about the time. You were imagining what it was going to feel like. You were imagining the hassle of travel. You were imagining how many of your needs were going to be exposed, how many of your needs were going to be fulfilled. It is a complex value proposition or calculation that you're making to determine whether this is an investment you want to make. Does that make sense? Now I taught a workshop last night at Harvard called Think Like an Innovator. And there's like 150 Harvard students in the room, and they're like, this is so complicated. It is complicated, which is why 95% of these suckers fail. If it was easy, the win rate would be like 100%. We just like plug in the variables and hit the go, and that would pop the innovation. It's hard and it's messy. I don't know why this is happening. The last thing I want to say about behavior, and this, I'm sorry, Frank, and to your professor buddies, I have no data to support this. Actually, I have no data to support anything, which is why I didn't do so well in business school. I believe that 90% of the adoption of new innovations, new sort of behavior change is a function of one of two motivators, either desperation or aspiration, the poles. The stuff in the middle doesn't play at all. And I also believe that what really works of those two things, aspiration versus desperation, is desperation. That mankind is so reluctant to change anything. We are pattern creatures. That our willingness to adopt new stuff, even if the ROI is not bad, is almost zero. But if we are desperate, bango, bingo, we're ready, let's do it. And the example I use is, I've been talking about losing 10 pounds for 2 years. Sit with that. I've been talking about losing 10 pounds. It's an aspiration. You know, I'd really like to lose 10 pounds. I'd like to be a little svelter. Have I? No, because it's an aspiration. Went to the doctor yesterday. Doctor says to me, Chris, I got some bad news. If you don't lose 10 pounds, you're going to have a cardiac arrest. Do you think I'm going to lose 10 pounds? I'll lose 10 pounds by Sunday. So as innovators, if you can tap into desperation-based needs. Here's another example. You guys know meal delivery? So Blue Apron is maybe the leader, and they've been doing really well in terms of customer acquisition, and they've been doing really poorly in terms of customer attrition. And you say, well, it's the quality of the product. It's not the quality of the product. The need is aspirational. You know, I'd love to have dinner with Johnny every, you know, like 3 family dinners a week, and they're going to deliver all the stuff, and it's going to be great. And the problem is, Wednesday that you thought you were going to have dinner with Johnny, you actually have to stay at work for whatever, and all of a sudden you have this stuff that you ordered for a meal on Wednesday that you're actually not doing, and all of a sudden that turns into guilt. And then all of a sudden you have all this packaging. You have like all these packages, like everything comes in a little container, and you have all this like cardboard and plastic and shit. And you're like, oh, I feel badly about myself. I'm like wasting things, and I'm like destroying the earth, and I got to stop doing this. And so the aspirational need drives acquisition, and the desperation need or behavior drives attrition. Does that make sense? Okay. Back to the hierarchy. The bottom is desperation, and the top is aspiration. 90% of the action is at the bottom, or certainly to the middle. The last point here is innovation is not about creating the function. You know, the example you use, I don't have a phone, but anybody has a phone, probably on your phone you have at least 4 screens of apps, and you never go to the 4th screen. Those are apps in search of a reason to exist. You know, it's like I say to people, downloads of your app are not success. Utilization of your app is success. But fundamentally, getting adoption of the innovation is really about changing behavior. There's another expression that I came up with the other day, which is kind of cute, which is in order for people to go through the door of change, they must first walk through the field of the familiar. That our ability to embrace straight up innovation, wholly new category, capability, whatever, is almost zero. That if you want to successfully market your innovation, make an element of it familiar. We know what a meal is. We know what a cab is. We know the things, you know, we know these things contextually, and that helps us embrace the new things within them. Okay, let's keep rolling here. Try. The last thing I'll say, which is what dissuades most innovators from being innovative, and the reason, by the way, the reason why the folks in the room that aren't declared they aren't creative is because they're actually afraid of it. The reason why most people don't step forward as innovators isn't because they're not capable, it's because they don't want to expose the truth that maybe they're not that good at it. So we'd rather just deny or delude, and that's why more progress doesn't happen. And I wrote a piece a couple weeks ago, it was literally just about the difference between hard and easy. And it was triggered by a Seth Godin article about education, and I don't know if you read that, but it was about the whole idea that education is too easy. It's structured to be too convenient. Just plug and play, consume the content, spit it back in a test, you're done. And it should be much messier and much harder, both for practitioners and the students. The piece that I wrote, the hypothesis is this: anything of value is hard. Anything of real meaning, real material value is hard. And the reason why it's hard, the reason why hard is because hard takes sacrifice. Like if I have to study before I actually vote, really? Like I have to study each of the candidates' policies and positions on everything from healthcare to immigration? That seems like a lot of work, Sarah, don't you think? Why don't I just go to the poll and hit the button? So nobody wants to sacrifice. That sounds like a pain in the ass. And the other thing it takes is taking fear on. Like exposing yourself to, I don't know this stuff. And maybe even admitting to those around you, I don't actually know. I don't know what I'm doing. And nobody wants to expose themselves to that. So we avoid fear, we avoid sacrifice, we avoid the hard, we end up doing the easy, and in doing the easy, we don't create meaningful things. And this guy understood this better than anybody. This is Steve Jobs. This is a quote. When you start looking at the problem and it seems really simple, you don't really understand the complexity of the problem, and your solutions are way too oversimplified. Then you get into the problem and you see it's really complicated, and you come up with all these convoluted solutions. That's where most people stop. The really great person, and I would just modify this to say the really great innovator, will keep going until they find the key underlying principle of the problem and come up with a beautiful, elegant solution that works. That sounds painfully, simply, obviously, trite, true, whatever, of course. What are you kidding? Why is that even a quotable quote? But it's true. All the failure I've seen in 3 years at Harvard is a function of this. Solutions are way too oversimplified, don't really understand the problem, create convoluted solutions. You're not working off the truth, you're working off your own delusions. And so you're spinning stuff out and hoping somehow that magically is going to turn into an innovation that is successful. But people don't like to do the hard stuff, so they do shit like that. This is just a this is the model we use at Harvard on how to think about innovation, and I won't go into details, but basically in the center is truth and trust. We're going to talk about that more in a second. It's an infinite loop. This task of innovation is not sequential. It's not linear. It's ongoing. It's forever. I think Facebook is trying to innovate as much today as it did 10 years ago. And then the other thing that we talk about a lot is it's all about the people. And we'll come back to that too in a second. So that's the outside-in view of innovation, like how to think about that from a product or service development standpoint. And then there's another view, which I don't know if it's going to be that hopefully interesting. I don't know if it'll be that applicable, but hopefully it'll be interesting. So when we're talking about RIM, I think we all agree, like, if you don't innovate as an organization, you're going to be out of business. I don't care what you are. You will end up being out of business. Just like empires end up being out of business, you will end up being out of business. I'm not sure, by the way, if I offend anybody, I apologize, but I do work in higher ed. I'm not sure a lot of people in higher ed actually embrace what I just said, that actually applies to higher ed, but I believe it does. I just think it's a longer time horizon. So the question is, how do you innovate? And a lot of organizations approach it one of three ways, which my view is they're Band-Aids, they're slap-ons, and they're fundamentally ineffective. So the way we're going to solve we're going to need to be more innovative as an organization, we're going to hire it. Sarah, you're now our Chief Innovation Officer, and your job magically is to imbue innovative sensibilities throughout the land to cause us to produce more amazing shit. Awesome. Works really well. Doesn't work at all. Then there's we're going to buy innovation. There's this really cool startup that's sort of in our space, but kind of tangential, and we're going to buy them, and just by buying them, we're going to somehow magically integrate them into our culture, and then it will make us them. Doesn't work out so well. And then the third one, we're going to create an innovation lab. That's the ticket. We're going to rent 15,000 square foot of space. We're going to have some whack job like Chris, and he's going to hire a bunch of other whack jobs, and they're going to like invent wacky shit, and then at some point the wacky shit will somehow, I don't know, we'll bring it into the mother, and then the mother will squash the wacky shit, and then we'll start over again. That works really well. Slap-on Band-Aids never, ever, ever work. Ever. I'm sorry. I have a bunch of friends that used to work for me that now work at Fidelity Labs. Not so good. Okay, so how do you do this? The only way to create an innovative organization is to actually create an innovative culture. So how do you do that? Well, before we do that, I want to go back in time a little bit. I love this. I love this story. So there's this guy named Sir John Glubb, G-L-U-B-B. You should all Google it when you get out of here, or if you're bored with me, Google it now. In the 1920s, he basically for like 30 years studied empires. That's all he did. That was his like thing. And he came up with, he wrote a book, obviously, not a good-looking man. But he basically came up with this sequence of events of empires. And I'm going to argue it applies to organizations, it applies to people, it applies to countries, it applies to everything. And the sequence goes something like this. Stage 1, the age of the pioneer. We're going to go to the new land. We're innovators. We're all in this together. Come on, people. Right? Stage 2, we're going to take over. We're going to conquer. Maybe the indigenous people, maybe the countries next door, I don't know, but we're on a roll, man. Let's keep going, and we're all in this together. Stage 3, let's settle down. We've established, and we have enough land, and we have some good things going, and we've moved from, a nomadic society to a agrarian one, and let's just start doing some bartering, buying and selling, and things are stabilizing. And, things are really pretty good. This is really done. We're done well. We now have an upper middle class. We now have, nice cars. We are amazing. We are just amazing. Have you seen my car? I have 2 cars. No, I have 3 cars. Our stuffy doesn't stink at all. We're amazing. The Roman Empire. Nero, fiddling as it burns. The excess, the indulgence, the beginning of the end. Familiar? Then the question is, where's the United States then? Let's not go there, because that would be depressing and we all start crying. Right? I added one, so he had 6. I added this one. So a lot of entities don't go out of business. RIM didn't go out of business. RIM's still alive, right? Empires, Britain, the British Empire didn't go out of business, but they're still alive. But they got cotton mouth, they're a little fuzzy, their eyes are a little bloodshot. They haven't slept in decades. They got this Brexit thing, it's all fucked up, right? Anyway, the point is your organization is on this path. It is. It's somewhere on this path. I don't know where it is, but it's on this path. And so the question is, how do you avoid, I don't know, from here on? How do you avoid that? And I have, as he had 7 stages, well, he had 6 plus mine, I have 7 lessons on how to build an innovative culture. This book does not exist. I fabricated the cover, but if you want to buy it, see me later. It's called a dry test. Number 1. So I live actually right next to that building. So I look at this building every day. And this guy that I was talking to, who works for State Street, was bemoaning, this is a year ago. He's like, yeah, the CEO, I forget what the guy's name is. He's insistent we become more innovative. Insistent that the only way State Street is going to survive is if we become more innovative. And I looked at the guy and I said, is he innovative? And he's like, no, he's an actuarial. Organizations are exactly like families. My kids follow what I do, the good and the bad. They're not carbon copies, but they model our behavior. If you want your organization, whether it's the institution or a department within the institution, to be more innovative, you have got to decide that you are going to be more innovative. This is my point about creativity. You first have to decide that this is important to you and that you are willing to change your behavior, in part because you're so desperate to change the outcome of your part of the organization. If you don't decide this, screw it. If you're going to delude yourself into thinking that other people somehow magically will do better at their job and change the way they're doing what they do, but you don't have to, come on. So you got to look the leader in the eyes could be the CEO, or actually could be you in the mirror. It's the first rule. The other rule is rewriting the unwritten rules. Anybody ever heard of the unwritten rule? Sarah, you've read everything. Very impressive. You should give her a raise. Is that true? No. So years ago, Arthur D. Little, which is an old management consultant, I think one of the first management consultant there, came up with this construct called the unwritten rules. He wrote a book about it. It's really interesting. And the gist of the book is what powers organizations is not the vision, it's not the mission, it's not the declared values, it's not the business plan, it's not any of the sort of defined, documented stuff on the wall. What powers organization, what informs what they do or don't do more than anything are the unwritten rules. The sensibilities, the behaviors, the whatevers that get transferred from employee to employee, generation to generation. Unwritten, unspoken, but understood. The example I use is a school that I worked with 3 years ago. Head of school hired me to help him turn the organization into a high-performing business. First thing I realized, there are 3 cultures going on here. Head of school culture, COO culture, head of faculty culture. 3 different cultures. So I said, let's have an offsite with the management team and like talk about some stuff. So we get everybody in a room. There's like 7 people. We're sitting around a table like this. And I go, okay, let's talk about the unwritten rules. They're like, what are that? And I explain what it is. And they're like, okay, I want everybody to write down the top 3 unwritten rules. Don't share. Write down on a piece of paper what you think the unwritten rules of this organization are. They all write them down. They hand it in to me. I go over to the flip chart. I start categorizing, right, the unwritten rules. The #1 unwritten rule of the organization that they all pretty much agreed on was distrust before trust. Imagine trying to create a high-performing organization. Imagine trying to create an innovative organization on a foundation of, I don't trust you one bit. No way, no how. Oops, sorry. Which points to rule number 3. I actually disagree, with the brainstorming thing. The guy's point of view on brainstorming was like, well, brainstorming doesn't work because people aren't comfortable actually telling the truth with each other. That's basically what he said. That's true. That doesn't mean brainstorming is bad. That means the management of the culture of the organization is bad. That means you've allowed distrust to rule the culture. Like if I'm afraid of Jeff, we have a dysfunctional relationship. We have a dysfunctional company, a dysfunctional institution. In fact, that little visual on the site, on the right, how many read the New York Times article 2 years ago about Project Aristotle, which Google initiated to try to understand high-performing teams? Sarah, once again, seriously, double, at least double, or time and a half, I don't know. So the gist of that article, and it's worth reading. I talk about it almost weekly, much to my wife's annoyance. The #1 attribute of high-performing organizations, the #1 attribute of innovative teams, the #1 attribute of any entity that has the capacity to create unique material value is psychological safety. I am not afraid of you. I can say whatever I want to you. You can say whatever you want to me. We can work through whatever shit we have, and we can make something better together. Whether you're my boss, you're my peer, you work for me, it doesn't matter. Our functional roles are irrelevant. We're sitting at this table as human beings, and we fundamentally trust each other and the environment we work in. At Harvard, I've spent the last 3 years creating a culture within our little innovation lab of psychological safety. And the #1 way I do that is I tell everybody the truth about everything. I told Brad about my son Emmett, who's struggling with bulimia and depression. All 22 members of my staff know that. They know he's in a program in Scurry, Texas. They know how hard it is for me. I have cried in front of them. Other people have cried at meetings. It's okay because we're trying to get to an environment where people trust people. If you can get there, your innovative capacity, I would argue, just went up 3,000%.
What was the name of the article?
Just Google Project Aristotle, Google New York Times, and it'll pop right up. Point 4. This is back to people's unwillingness to change their behaviors, to step forward, to step up. They need some motivating context. Desperation is really effective. So if I went back to Harvard and I said, hey guys, if we don't actually implement the strategic plan that we talked about this morning at 10 o'clock and get it done by the end of November, they're going to shut us down. Do you think the productivity would go up? You know, problem with that is not particularly motivating, but it is motivating in the short term. It doesn't sustain itself. The other side of it is when I got to Harvard, and I've done this at every company I've run, I created some language around the journey. Remember the journey to Santa Clara? Yeah. Brad and I used to work together. At Harvard, I created something called the journey to I. So when I got to the I lab, I realized, oh my God, this isn't actually innovative. The people here aren't innovative. What we're doing isn't innovative. It's actually a co-working space for Harvard students. Shoot me. No, literally. 30 days in, I'm like, what have I done? But I'm like, okay, we're going to turn this whole thing around. We're going to completely change the nature of this place. We're going to go from being reactive to proactive, from transactional to innovative. And we're going to call this thing the journey to I. And I stands for innovation. I stands for intentionality. I stands for interconnectedness. I stands for the individual. And I stands for the impact that we are going to have, not just on the customers we serve, but on the employees that are helping us do it. And the journey to I is the superset theme, if you will, of our strategic plan. We talk about on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. We are on a journey. And that language has served as a fairly effective motivating force for the organization. You know what I'm talking about, right? Anybody have one? Anybody have a sacred cow? Come on. Talk about truth and trust. We're in the cone of silence. Nobody will talk. You know what I'm talking about. Sacred cows. The elephant is the thing you won't say to the CEO that you really should say, but you're afraid to say it because he or she might fire your ass. And then the ugly babies are, I've been working on this project for like 3 years, and I know it doesn't really work, but I just love it, and I can't put it to sleep. I just love it. I love it. And let's just keep funding it, even though we know it doesn't have a chance in hell of succeeding. So here's my this is like a slightly twisted sacred cow version, but so I do one big consulting gig a year because Harvard pay sucks. And there's this big technology company. I'm like the CEO whisperer, and I'm involved with their strategic planning process. And we did this whole strategic plan session a couple of months ago, and we do the standard SWOT analysis. You guys know what SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threat. So we do the strengths on a flip chart. We do the weaknesses, flip chart. We do the opportunities, flip chart. And then we do the threats one. I'm like, okay, what are the threats? And they're like, competition, and the technology, and I go, there's one other threat. And there's like 8 of them sitting around this big mahogany conference table. And they're like, what's that? The threat is you. You're actually the biggest threat. You've been running this business for 20 years. It's a $1 billion business. It's successful. It's public. The biggest threat is you. And your inability to believe you don't have to evolve. Your inability to innovate yourself. Your inability to change this whole thing up. That's the biggest threat. So it's possible that we are the sacred cows. We are the lumbering elephants. And we are the ugly babies. It's possible. Almost done. So this little stretchy thing is called a stretch reward. So we created this a couple years at Harvard to recognize failure. Not to recognize success. To recognize employees who have stepped up, stepped out, taken some risks, tried some shit, and it failed. And we give them this in recognition of that. We give them a gift certificate, gift card, several $1,000 gift card. No, $200, kidding. But it should be several $1,000s. But the point is, we are very overt about celebrating failure. We're very overt about celebrating. But that's antithetical to how we're, no. We only pay people for winners. We don't pay people for losers. Well, if you only reward people for winners, then There's a disincentive in that to try stuff, because if there's risk involved, it might not be a winner, in which case you're going to be ridiculed by the rest of the organization, so I'm not going there. Point 7. And this is the big one, and I'm almost done. An organization is nothing but a collection of individuals. Whatever school you work at doesn't exist. What exists are the individuals that work at that school. If you want that entity to be more innovative, it is necessary and logical that means the individuals within it must be more innovative. There's nothing else. You can't slap it on. You can't buy it. It's not a pill. You can't take it. The only way to do this is to actually innovate yourself. Which begins, my earlier point, is you've got to first declare, I am an innovator. I am a creator. I can create change in my life, in my business, in my world for the betterment of me and everybody else. So we created, and this is my message to the folks at Harvard, we created these 5 human performance principles, guiding lights, guardrails on how to encourage the people on our staff to be more innovative. And the first one is start with why. Understand the problem before you start working on anything. The second one is raise your own bar. Become a learning machine. Sarah is a learning machine. No, I'm not kidding. I don't even know her. I met her like, an hour ago. But this is your point you made about breadth. You cannot be a creative person or an innovative person without a breadth of perspective, a breadth of content. Limited content in, limited content out. It's fundamental. So you got to raise your own learning bar. You got to get outside. One of the issues I see in higher ed is it's such a siloed place. Like even the Harvard Innovation Labs, we have to break this natural sensibility of, like, we go to work every day. We open the door. We go in. We close the door. We talk to each other, and then we leave. Well, there's a big world out there that we need to be bringing into us, and or we need to be going out to that world. Think sideways is none of this is discrete. If there's one thing I've learned about innovation, you have to do it together. Jeff in a room alone trying to solve a problem is not going to be as effective as Jeff and I in a room trying to solve a problem. Got to think laterally, think sideways. And the last one, and this is like probably the hardest one for anybody, take risk and eschew legacy thinking and convention. Don't look back. That presumes that the organization you're working in values risk and isn't simply holding on to legacy because it perceives that to be the least risky way to go, where I actually think it's the most risky way to go. So the conclusion is, what are you going to do? Not what your organization is going to do. What are you going to do as an innovator? How are you going to change the choices you make, the work you do, the way you approach it, that's going to have a better, greater impact on what you do, on your life, your own movie, on the organization that you work for, or whatever? It's a choice. Like, it really is a choice. And this is what I said to the students last night. This is not like waiting for somebody to tell you. This is actually a choice that I think each and every one of us has the ability to make. So with that, I hope it was helpful, maybe even comical. I don't know. Thank you very much. Thanks, Jeffrey. Now you have like the real deal.
I don't agree with anything you just said. We'll take another 5-minute break and see you then. Thanks. Charles? Welcome back to MindEdge's LINK Symposium. We're now going to turn to Michael Karl, a mentalist from New York, which Red Sox fans might greatly appreciate today. Michael.
All right, thank you so much. I'm a Mets fan, so it's okay. Don't worry about it. So I'm a mentalist. How many, by a show of hands, know what a mentalist is? A few people? Okay, you guys are cool. All right, you guys are all right. How many people have seen the show The Mentalist? Like the same people? And then one in the back. All right, cool, thanks. So it's similar to that if you've seen the show. So I read body language, facial expressions, influence people to make certain decisions, and we have some fun with that. So we're going to play some cool games. So the best way for me to show you what I do is to literally show you what I do. So can I have everybody please stand up for me? All right. What I want you guys to do is reach into your pockets, off the table, into your handbag, anything you have. Find a small object. So a coin could be ideal. It could be a crumpled up piece of paper, a candy. Perfect. That's what I was looking at. Anything that you could conceal in one hand. So a pen might not work. Anything you could hide in one hand, because we're going to play that which hand game in a second, where you're going to come out with both hands, hiding the object in one of your hands. The other hand will be empty. So just so I know, when you have your object, hold it between your fingers like this, but behind your back. So it's going to be like this. So when I know you're ready, you have that object behind your back. Paper, awesome. Cool. All right, so most of you are ready. So in a second, I'm going to try to influence you which hand to put the object in. So you're going to come out both hands. I'm going to try to influence you which one. But don't do this yet, because my job is to try to influence you. So you have two choices, right? 50-50 shot. You'll have two hands. You could either put in the left hand, or you could put in the right. So you have two choices, the left hand or the right. Once again, the left or the right, it's up to you. Come out with both hands, just like this, concealing the object in one of your hands. So good? Good. Are you ready? Just hold them out just like that, so I know you're ready. Okay. So when I came out, it is totally true. You have a 50-50 shot. You all have two hands. However, I said I'm going to try to influence you which hand to choose. That's going to trigger something in your mind. Most of you don't know me. Like, I don't know this guy. He just walked here. He's from New York. I don't know him. I'm going to pay attention to what he said. He's not going to get me. Maybe that's what I want. So if you noticed, I said you could either put in the left hand or your right hand. But I raised my left hand. I emphasized the word left. So many of you probably thought I wanted you to put it in your left hand. It's actually the exact opposite. So if you have the object in your right hand, you could sit down, you're out of the game. Okay, that's a good majority of you. Now for those of you that are still standing, if you get anything from this entire day, this is it right now. Pay attention. Pay close attention to those that are sitting. Make a mental note. Write it down after if you have to. All of these people, these are the ones that are easily influenced. So if you need anything, make a mental note. All right. Sorry, nobody agrees with anything anybody says, so it's okay. All right, so what I want you to do is go put the object back behind your back. We're going to do one more round, so go back behind your back. Switch hands back and forth, side to side. It's completely up to you. When you're ready, come out both hands. Again, concealing the object in one of your hands. Okay? Right. That's how many of you probably just kept it in the exact same hand as the first round, right? So if you kept it in the same hand as the first round, you could sit down, you're out of the game. All right. So are we down to 4 people? Is that it? 4? Can I ask all 4 of you to join me up here in front of everybody? You could put your object down. I don't need it. But you could put your object down, put it in your pocket. Unless it's a $100 bill or anything like that, I'll take that. I could use that. Otherwise, join us up here. All right. Just line up in a row, just like this.
Nobody wants to go.
Yeah, go. You can all hide in the back. That's fine. Because I'm going to start on this side. And your name?
Renee.
Renee. Renee, over here, I have a necklace. Okay, I'm going to hand you this necklace. Now, Renee, what you're going to do is the 4 of you are going to huddle up. Okay, Renee, you're going to decide who gets the necklace, which hand it goes in. So the 3 of you are going to hold your hands out just like this. Renee, you're going to decide who gets it, which hand it goes in, completely up to you. When you're all set, just line up in a row like you are. Everybody have your hands out. Hold on, Renee, before you do this. Just listen to my instructions before. Okay, hold your hands out just like this. Whoever does have this necklace, make sure it's not hanging out. I would obviously know who had it. It would make my job a lot easier. Okay, we're going to try to find this necklace. Renee, if you don't want to give it to any of these people, you don't have to. Okay, if you don't like them, you don't know them, you don't trust them, completely up to you. You could pretend you could keep it for yourself. It's possible. You can totally keep it for yourself. It's up to you. Okay. However, you're right. If you do keep it for yourself, it is considered a selfish act. So whether you want to look selfish in front of these people, I don't know. That's up to you. I don't know you, Renee. So decide who gets it. You could keep it for yourself if you want. So line up in a row. Everybody have your hands just like this. Make sure I can't see it. Okay, let's do that now. All right. So in a second, we're going to ask them all the same question. I'm going to ask them, do you have the necklace in your left hand? Do you have the necklace in your right hand? For this game, the only answer is going to be yes. So pay attention to their eyes. You're going to notice that the truth tellers tend to look at you while the liars tend to look away. Okay, so we're going to see who's lying, who's telling the truth here. Are you guys all set? Cool. Cool, this is working. Perfect. And your name?
Christine.
Christine, okay. So I'm going to ask you all the same question. I'm going to ask you, do you have the necklace in your right hand? Do you have the necklace in your left hand? For this game, the only answer is yes. So whether you have the necklace or you do not have the necklace, the only answer is yes. Does that make sense? Yes, that's the only answer. Cool, all right, great. Yes. Again, pay attention to their eyes. You're going to notice the truth tellers tend to look at you, the liars tend to look away. So Christine, do you have the necklace in your right hand?
Yes.
Just yes, okay. Left hand?
Yes.
Do you have the necklace in your right hand?
Yes.
Left hand?
Yes.
All right, I got you, I got you. Do you have the necklace in your right hand?
Yes.
Do you have the necklace in your left hand?
Yes.
Okay. Renee, do you have the necklace in your right hand?
Yes.
Do you have the necklace in your left hand?
Yes.
Tough crowd. So I actually lied. I apologize to all of you. I lied to you because I knew they were going to hear it. It's actually the exact opposite. So the truth tellers don't have to stare at you because they know that they're telling the truth, while the liars tend to stare you down to see if you actually believe their lies. Exactly, Christine. I think you stared at me just enough. You can show both hands empty, take a seat. Give her a nice round of applause. Keep your hands closed. All right. Okay. Put the microphone down for a second. I don't need it. This time, I'm going to ask you the same question, but I want you to answer truthfully, but only in your head. Does that make sense? So don't say anything out loud, but if you have the necklace in that hand, just think yes. If you don't, just think no. Does that make sense to everybody? So just think it, don't actually say anything out loud. Okay. Do you have the necklace in your right hand, just in your head? Do you have the necklace in your left hand, just in your head? Okay. Do you have the necklace in your right hand, just in your head? Do you have the necklace in your left hand, just in your head? Perfect. Renee, do you have the necklace in your right hand, just in the head? Okay. Yeah. Do you have the necklace in your left hand, just in your head? Perfect. Notice if somebody asks you a question, you can't not answer it, right? You might not physically answer. You might not tell these people. If somebody asks you, what's your name? Where do you live? What do you do? Oh my God, I'm not asking all these questions. All these questions are coming at you. But you're still thinking the answer. You just don't want to tell these people. I do believe that you answered honestly enough that you do not have the necklace. Can you show both hands empty? Thank you so much. Give her a nice round of applause. All right. If it's burning, if you feel that burn, you could put them down for a second. I know. It's a good exercise. Okay. So it's down to 2. I'm hoping one of you have it. Otherwise, somebody could have pocketed my necklace. It wouldn't have been the first time. Hopefully not this time. Okay. Here's where the psychology comes into play. See, earlier I said to you, Renee, you could keep it for yourself, but it would be a selfish act. So nobody really wants to look selfish in front of everybody. So most people would give it away. But Renee, you are also one of the last people standing, so you kind of knew what I was saying, how I'm influencing you. So maybe you would keep it for yourself, thinking that I would think that most people would give it away. But Renee, I think you're a smart guy. I think maybe you would give it away thinking that I would think you would keep it for yourself, because obviously most people would give it away. Keep your hands closed. Renee, you can show your hands. I don't think you're a selfish person. Can you show both hands empty? Thank you so much. Give Renee a nice round of applause. All right. I'm hoping you have it. Can you face me for a second? Hold your hand straight out. Okay. I'm trying to figure out which hand the necklace is in. I hope you have it. I truly do. Now you're going to do something right now that's going to give it away. You're going to do something right now that's going to give it away. Okay, it's not that. Don't worry. It's not that either. No. You're okay. You're comfortable doing this, right? Okay, right there. Can you open your right hand, please? Thank you so much. There you go. Thank you so much for helping out. Thank you. Whew. Saves me a necklace. All right. So, is there anybody in here that I can trust? Tough crowd. Not even one. All right. Well, I'm going to need two. Where is two volunteers I could trust? Sure. Right in the middle. You could stay right where you are. Sure. What I want you to do is think of a 2-digit number. It could be any 2-digit number. Just, I would say, make it above 20, so it's not a teen number. Any 2-digit number above 20. I want you to just write it on this pad nice and big so that we can see it later. If we have to come back to it, you don't show me. You could show it to anybody else if you want to. If you don't want to, you don't have to. It's fine. Anybody else? Great. I'm just going to pick. Sure. You can play along. Over here, I have a Rubik's Cube. Are you familiar with a Rubik's Cube? Okay. I'm just going to give you this Rubik's Cube. I want you to just mix it up a little bit throughout the rest of the time we're going to be here. So just mix it up. Just keep mixing it up. You can put it down if you want to pick it up. Just play with it. Cool? That's all you got to do. You're great at mixing. Keep shuffling it up. Great. So, first things first, how did I know who had the necklace? Partial, yes. And what was your name? I'm sorry. Becky. Okay. How did I know that Becky had the necklace? It simply comes down to this. It's influence, and this sentence will sum it up. You are the direct reflection of the top 5 people you spend time with. Here there are only 4. What does that mean? How does that make sense? It wasn't Becky. Becky didn't do anything wrong, actually. But it's the company that you are around, the people that are in your circle. So as I go down the line, Becky is really the only one that can screw it up, because if she doesn't answer properly or messes it up, the game's over. Oh, she screwed up, she has a necklace. She said no when she's supposed to say yes, or said something out loud when she's supposed to keep it in her head. It's all really on Becky, because if somebody else screws it up, it doesn't matter. They don't have the necklace. The pressure's off of them. There's only pressure on one person, which is Becky, to make sure she could lie and get through it. So as I go down the line and I get to Becky, everybody else's eyes just gravitate. And in their head, they're saying, don't screw it up, don't screw it up, don't screw it up, Becky. So if you could see not just the one person, but everybody that you're around, and there's subtle things that sometimes you're around the right 5 people that are going to help you get where you want to go, and sometimes you don't even see it, and without noticing it, they're just holding you back. And I talk to you about how you can find the right people and put those right people into your circle. Because when you can pull from different unique people, different creative people we're talking about, that's how we can innovate. When we can gather new perspectives from all different types of people, inside and outside of our industry, when we can get those perspectives, that's what leads to innovation. So I'm going to tell you a quick story about how I got started. A few people asked me, how did you get started in magic? What did you do? How is this even a thing? So I got a magic kit. I was 6 years old. I got a magic kit that my mom bought me. And I dabbled with it a little bit here and there. But I didn't have that self-confidence. I didn't think I was really good. I was creating my own tricks, but I only showed it to my mom or like really close family members or anybody. Didn't really show it to anybody. Until I was about 13. So when I was 13, David Blaine came out with his big street magic special, the first one. It kind of changed magic. And when I saw him perform on there, that's when I gained the confidence, because I said, wow, I've been creating all these things. Just like what Chris was saying about how many people are creative. There's people who don't put their hand up, but you are. I was creating it, I didn't think I was. Until I saw David Blaine performing it. And then I said, wait, I do those same things he's doing, but he's on TV. Now, maybe this is true. Maybe I am creative. I have something here. So I started doing it a little bit more and more. But everybody's always going to tell you what you can't do. People will be quick to tell you. You don't have to shuffle it constantly. It's up to you, but yeah. Everybody's always going to tell you what you can't do. If somebody else can't do it, they're going to tell you you can't do it because that's what people do. Why are people like that? I don't know. I wish they weren't. I wish they would be more motivating and inspiring. But people like to see you bring you down. So they're going to tell you what you can't do. I was told I can't be a magician. I can't do this or that. So I said, okay, sure. So I did something else. I went to school. In college, I figured I can't do magic, man, because everybody tells me I can't do it. However, I got more into the psychology of magic, which is what they call mentalism, which is a small part, about influencing people, understanding the human behavior, why people do what they do, reading body language, facial expressions. Because I figured when I get out of college, if I'm on a job interview, if I could influence the guy to hire me, I get a job, right? In college, if you're at a bar or anywhere, you want to talk to a girl, you want to influence her to go out with you, I could get a girlfriend, right? That was my thinking. And it worked out. So we've been married a year. 2 days ago, it would be a year anniversary. So it all worked out. So she said yes. Yeah, influenced her. Well, she influenced me to propose. But it all worked out. It's all good. So if you could influence people, that's what I thought was great. I was working in a cell phone carrier, Verizon Wireless at the time. This was back in 2008. Anybody have Verizon? Okay, cool. Well, it's okay if you don't. I don't have it anymore. But I had Verizon at the time. And if you walk into a Verizon store, you come up, you want to upgrade your phone, you come to my booth, you give me your phone number, I type it in the computer, all your information will come up. So your name, where you live, the type of plan, phone, everything you have. But some people, this is 2008, 10 years ago, that's back when BlackBerries were big. Remember those times where they had that big share? We just learned that. So people didn't know people sometimes they forgot their phone numbers. It was kind of new to them. So they would come in and say, my name is here and I live in this town. You put it in, unless there's multiple of you, we could figure out which one you are. But if you were to type in Oprah Winfrey Chicago, unless there's multiple Oprah Winfreys in Chicago, we could probably get her contact info. So in 2008, a very historic thing happened. Barack Obama won the election and became the first black president. It's a historic thing for the country. However, this kid in Bayside, Queens decided to type into the computer Barack Obama Chicago. Guess what? All his info came up, right? He's like, wow, I want to call him. I'm going to give him a call and congratulate him. Tell him how I feel. Because that's such a great idea, right? Perfect. From the store phone. Sorry. From the store phone. So he puts this phone on speaker. Why would you put it on speaker? Dials the number. Rings once. I was like, there's no way. Like, Obama's picking up the phone. Rings again. I was like, there's no way. Rings the third time, eventually goes to voicemail. And it said, you've reached Senator Barack Obama. If this is an emergency, you could reach me on my BlackBerry at such and such number. This is where it comes into play. So this kid decided, you know what, it's emergency. I really got to tell him how I feel about this. Like, he has to know that we're supportive. So he calls the BlackBerry. Rings once. It's like, there's no way. He literally just won. Rings twice. Obama picks up the phone. Hello? I can't do the voice, but hello? He's like, congratulations, bro. I knew you could do it. It's like, who is this? He's like, we got your back, man. Whatever you need, we got you. Obama hangs up on the kid. Very next day, Secret Service show up to our store. Shut us down for the entire day. Locked the doors, told us to pull our cars all the way around back. Went through the surveillance footage. If you were seen looking at the number, you were terminated. Apparently, the back of my head looks very similar to the back of other people's heads. So they didn't know I was looking at it. If you logged in, you have login codes to keep track of sales. If you logged in and looked at it, you were terminated. Pulled our cars around back, literally took apart our cars, looked through anything. They really do not mess around, just so you know this. Secret Service does not play. All right. Brought me to the back, hooked me up to a polygraph test. Asked me a bunch of questions, personal questions, about my family, very vulnerable questions. And, of course, did I see the number? Did I do anything with the number? Anything like that. This was 2008. Kind of a recession right there. It's tough to find a job. I had a job. I couldn't lose this job, right? So I knew how to read people, understand facial expressions, body language. I figured, well, I could lie. So I lied through the polygraph test. and I passed. I kept my job for 3 months. Then I got fired. Had absolutely nothing to do with the polygraph test, with Obama, with anything. Just at the time, Verizon bought out a company called Alltel Wireless. They had a thing, they had to bring their employees in. They couldn't fire them, so they had to fire tenure employees, pay them less. It's economics. So I was out on the street, gave me a severance package, and I was looking for work. What am I gonna do? Well, it was hard to find a job back then. All I had was these skills that I've acquired over years since I was 6 years old. I figured, well, I know how to perform, I know how to entertain, I know how to do this, but I don't know the business side. So what do I have to do? Exactly what I said. Surround yourself with those people, that circle that do know how to do those things. So I could pull from it. Surround myself with people who knew about business, about marketing, about websites, all the different things that I needed to run a successful show business. So to surround myself with those right people, and that took me traveling on cruise ships. I was one of the official magicians of the Orlando Magic, performing all over the country, and now I'm here with you speaking to you guys. But why do I tell you this? I tell you this because just like whenever you're stuck in a hard situation and times are down, times get tough, whether you're laid off from a job or you have a deadline to meet at work, who are the people that you're surrounding yourself with to get that job done? And be very conscious of that. So I narrowed it down to there's 3 different types of people in the world that you want to surround yourself with and also that you want to become. Let's take this off in case. Up with the microphone. So, hopefully it doesn't help. The first person is an egg personality. So this is what we call the boiling pot of water of life. When you're thrown in a boiling pot of water, that tough situation, what happens to you? When you throw an egg in a boiling pot of water, what happens? It gets all hard and tough. Those are those type of people that they look hard on the outside, but they're really not. But when you throw them in those situations, they play that blame game. They're in that tough situation. It's always somebody else's fault. They're not trusting. That's what we were talking about before. They're not trusting other people. They're very hard-headed. They're always blaming and arguing over something. They blame everything else. They blame that situation. The next type of person is a carrot. What happens to a carrot when you drop it in boiling water? Exactly. It seems hard on the outside. You drop it in that situation, it turns to mush. We know people like this too. You throw them in a tough situation, they fold their hand. They take a step back. They don't know what to do. They look to somebody else. They don't know what's going on. Then there's that third person. That person that I want you all to be, to strive to be. And that I want you to find these people and bring them into your life. And that person is the coffee bean. When you drop a coffee bean in a boiling pot of water, what happens? It changes its environment that's around it. It adds life. It adds vibrancy. It deters the situation. It doesn't run from it. It changes that environment. And those are the type of people that you need to find in your life from all different spaces, inside and outside of your industry. That's what's going to lead to that innovation and that creativity. So, I want to share with you now the longest, if you want to call it a trick, routine, whatever you want to call it, that it took me to develop. Now, this trick took me about 7 years to create. People say, how do you do magic? Well, it takes a really long time to work on a skill and a craft. It's hard work, dedication, what we're talking about. If it was easy, everybody could do it. And it took me a long time. And I had to pull from different perspectives, which I'm going to explain in a minute. And it boils down to a simple quote. Everybody know Penn and Teller? Penn and Teller. Okay, there's a quote by Teller. He's a little one that doesn't talk, but he does because he gave a quote, so he does something. He said, magic is just someone spending more time on something than anyone would reasonably expect. It's just putting more time into that one thing than anyone would expect. And I want to show you guys something here. Okay. All right. I have a paper ball. I'm just going to throw this out into the audience. So if you catch it, just hold on to it, okay? Okay, cool. Well, I don't want everybody to think we set this up in some over-the-head paper ball throwing contest. I knew you were going to sit there and all this. So what I want you to do is I want you to throw that paper ball anywhere you'd like. Yep. Okay, sure. And your name, sir? What is it, Rob? B-O-B, Bob. Okay. Bob, would you mind joining us up here? You can leave the paper ball where it is. Give Bob a nice round of applause. Welcome, Bob. Oh, it doesn't matter. It's fine. I'll take it then. Bob, nice to meet you, Bob. All right. Bob, I will give you this microphone in a second. But first, over here I have a few books. Okay, these are all books. They're all #1 best-selling books from different genres. Okay, maybe you read them, maybe not. Maybe some of you guys have. They're all made into movies as well. So I have Stephen King's The Shining. Have you read it? Seen the movie? Anybody read it or seen the movie? Okay, read Rob. Right, okay. Dan Brown, The Da Vinci Code. Read it? Okay. Anybody? And I have Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Come on, Bob. Did not read it. All right. Bob, I'm going to give you the option to choose any one of these 3 books. It's completely up to you. It could be something you read, not read, seen a movie. It's up to you. Either The Shining, Da Vinci Code, or Harry Potter. Harry Potter? Cool. Step out of your comfort zone. You didn't read it. Good. I'll leave these right here. Now, Bob, what I want you to do is I want you to grab one of these. Let me give it to you in a second. Okay, I'm going to put this here. All right. Bob, what I want you to do is I want you to open that book to a random page and keep it to yourself. So open it up to a random page. Keep that to yourself. Don't let me see it. Don't give us a page number. Hold it up to yourself. You got something? You happy? You're happy? Good. I'm glad you're happy. Now you're going to have a left side. You're going to have a right side. I want you to either choose the left page or the right page. And I want your eyes to scroll down that page. And I want you to settle on a word. But not any word. I want it to be a nice big word, like 8 or more letters, multiple syllables. Anything big, that's why I got big books. If there's multiple words on that page, you could change your mind a couple times and settle on something. Just nothing like it, the, then, not a character name, nothing like that. Anything nice and big. Do you have something? Do you know what it means? Perfect, great. Are you going to remember that word? If you could, then you close the book and you remember your word, you're good. You got it? Okay, cool. You close the book, put it down. All right. Now we're going to play a game, Bob. I want you to think of the first letter of that word. Just the first letter. Okay? And you're going to send it to everybody here. And we're going to see who can pick it up. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to start on this side. And as I go across, I just want you to send that. Well, in a second. Hold on a second. Don't send it yet. Just keep sending it. Don't say anything out loud. Just keep sending it across the room until we get to the other side. Okay? All right? So we're going to do that. And if you want to do this, the antenna sometimes helps with the reception. Yes, okay. So if you want to help with the reception, you can do this way. And what I want you guys to do is just shout out the first letter that comes to your mind. The first letter that you get. Ready? Keep sending it. And just shout out whatever you have. Anything. Whatever you got. Okay. Bob, did you hear your letter?
I did not.
You did not hear your letter. Thanks a lot, guys. What was your first letter?
L.
L. Okay, L. Did anybody say L? Great. Okay, so maybe mentalism isn't for you guys, but we'll see what we can do here. All right. I'm going to give you this microphone. I want you to hold on to it. Is it on? Is it on? I believe it's on. Yeah, it's on. Cool. All right. I want you to send me your whole word. Don't say anything out loud. Just send it to me. But I want you to send it in syllables. So if the word was, say, superstition, in your mind, you'd just be saying superstition, and you'd break it down that way. Does that make sense? Okay. I want you to send it to me. Okay, cool. Okay. All right. Come on, Bob. We could do this. Do you know how many syllables there are? Don't say it if you do. Don't say it. Okay. Okay. I think 4, 5, maybe something. Okay. Go ahead. Go ahead. Keep sending it. Keep sending it. Do I know how to spell? That's the problem. You guys read that? Okay, I think this is it. I think this has to be it. Don't say it if you have it, and if I spelled it wrong, I'm sorry. I wasn't a spelling bee champion. Bob, into the microphone, can you please tell everybody the word that you were thinking of?
Lightheartedly.
Lightheartedly, it had to be, right? Perfect. Thank you so much, Bob. Thank you so much. All right. Give it up for Bob. Awesome. Whew, first time that worked. All right. So how did that work? Memorized every word in every book. Thank you very much. That's the first assumption what people think. I'm going to break down the creative process of how that took me 7 years and why it did. See, I saw Penn and Teller do this when I was about 7, 8, 9, something like that. When I was a kid, I saw Penn and Teller do this. I was like, how did he do that? Maybe just like some of you guys. You're looking at it and you're like, I was like, how? Graphic memory, I don't even know if you could memorize all of those words, even if you did. But I figured one thing was, if you tell somebody open to a random paper, what is random? Somewhere in the middle, right? So if there's like, say, I don't know, I'm sure there's way more than this, but say it's like 10,000 words in a book. You open it up, eliminates about half. The first 25, last 25% of the book, usually they're not going to choose. So now I only have to memorize about half the book. That's possible, right? And I was stuck on this for a long time, for a couple years, until I met someone actually in the linguistics field who explained to me that longer words look different visually on the page and in your mind than shorter words. So I said, okay, well, if I could have them think of a longer word and how they look at the word, how they see it in their mind, it's going to be different than a shorter word. So now I only have to memorize every long word in half of the book in all of those books. And I was stuck on that for years until I came up with somebody else of a different industry. And what they told me will blow, and they didn't even tell me this. I heard it, and I was like, wow, that's it. That's the secret. I could move on to the next step, and it'll blow your mind. But I can't share that with you, because if I did share it with you, you would know how the trick is done. But what my point is pulling from different areas, gathering new perspectives from someone in the linguistics field. That's what I needed. They're not magicians or mentalists, or someone in a different industry. And that's when you bring these ideas together, and then you can create. So the more knowledge you have, the more experiences you have, that's where you could pull from to get that creativity and those juices flowing. Now I'm going to share a story with you. I gave you half of it. When I was 6 years old, I got a magic kit. There was something else that happened to me when I was 6 years old. My mother took me to the local fair, as you call it, or carnival. Local carnival fair rides and games and all that stuff. I was 6 years old. I'd never been to something like this. So I'm walking through the fair, and there's all these games you could play to win prizes. I didn't know they were fixed at the time, but that's what it was. So I walked through and I saw one prize. I didn't even know what the game was at the time. I just saw it and I was like, I want that. That's it. I want it. I'm getting it. Mom, we're going to play this game. I got to get that. And what was that, you ask? That was Mighty Mouse. Anybody know Mighty Mouse? Right. Okay, cool. He's here to save the day. That's what I wanted. I didn't even know Mighty Mouse at the time. This was my first introduction to Mighty Mouse. It just caught my eye as a kid, as a 6-year-old. I said, I want that. So I walk up and I say, okay, what is the game? And the game was, they had a laundry basket and a bouncy ball. And the idea of the game was if you could throw the ball into the basket, you win a Mighty Mouse. I was like, that's easy. Okay, $1 a shot. So I asked my mom for $1. She gives me $1. Take it, step up to this line. They make me move back. Lined up my shot. I took it, and I missed. So what does a 6-year-old kid do? Exactly, you ask for another $1. Anybody who has kids knows, hey, Mom, can I have another $1? Like, I could win this Mighty Mouse. So, okay, get another $1, step up to the plate, take my shot. I missed. So what do? You ask for another $1. You don't stop doing this. This is the recurring thing. I was like, Ma, I hit the rim this time. I got this. I'm getting closer. I think we're good. She's like, okay, one more time. Same result. Missed the shot. Asked again. My mom cut me off. She's like, no, we can't keep sitting here losing money. You're not going to make this shot. You're 6 years old, you can't make this shot. I was like, okay, geez. So we go home afterwards. First thing I do, take my mom's laundry basket, throw out her dirty clothes on the floor, put it down, got a ball, and I started practicing. Day and night, I started practicing for an entire week. Didn't go to lunch or dinner, was up late at night. My mom didn't know. All I was doing was practicing shooting a ball into a basket. So the next week comes around, that next weekend, I tell my mom, I was hitting that shot, say, 5 times out of 10. I got so good, I was hitting it 5 times. It's like 50-50. I was like, okay, so if I had $2, I could make it. My mom gave me 3 again. I'm good. I got this. Next weekend rolls around. I say to my mom, Mom, I'm going to be outside. I'll be waiting by the car. We're going back to the fair. I'm going to win my Mighty Mouse. What does she say to me? Yeah, it's like that fair is over. We go to that park every weekend, and it's never there. Didn't you realize? I was like, wow, yeah, my mom makes a good point. Okay. But where's the fair? Where'd it go? She's like, I don't know. It's a moving fair. It just goes. When is it coming back? My mom had no answers for me. And I thought, as a 6-year-old kid, if anyone has kids that would know this, I thought every time there's a ball and basket game, the prize is the Mighty Mouse. I didn't know they just throw random stuff back there. I thought a ball and basket, Mighty Mouse, balloon water gun thing, you get a dinosaur. Everything had their prize. I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to practice. Next time it comes back or we go to a fair, I'm going to find it. I'm going to win my Mighty Mouse. So I kept practicing day and night. I kept practicing. So I was hitting it 9 times out of 10. I got so good, I started putting the laundry basket on top of the dishwasher, top of the refrigerator. I was hitting behind the back, under the leg, off the wall shots. I became the best ball and basket kid you've ever seen as a 6-year-old. Kid you not. Until we went to another fair. And guess what? There's no Mighty Mouse. But I won whatever prize it was. I won other prizes. And when you win 5 of the little ones, you could trade it in for a big one. That's what I did. My mom was so pissed. I had to tie it to the roof of the car while she's driving, hold on to it so it doesn't blow away. That's what we had to do. So I got so good, I was winning all these prizes that actually other kids, other parents of other kids would pay me money to win their prizes for their kids. That was my little side hustle at the time. At 6, 7, 8 years old, I would win side money, winning other prizes for kids. I was about 9 or 10 years old, and I was waiting for my mom. She was works in the school system, and I was waiting in the gym for her. I'm just sitting there, and I see these 2 guys playing this game. They're taking a ball, and they're shooting it into a basket. I asked them, what is this game that you're playing? They said, this is basketball. I was like, oh, hold on a second. I know basketball. I've been playing basketball for the last 6 years. I know what basketball is. It's like, no, this is basketball. So I was like, well, what if this is the ball and basket game that'll get me my Mighty Mouse? You see where this is going? This is how obsession becomes creativity, what they were talking about earlier, where I just needed to get that done. I needed to play basketball. So I learned basketball. I was at the park every day. I got the high school team. I won high school MVP, got a college scholarship, played Division II college basketball until I tore my Achilles in my sophomore year. I was devastated. Couldn't play anymore. All of this, because I couldn't win a Mighty Mouse, I didn't get when I was 6 years old. So I was devastated. I lost my scholarship. At the time, another tough time. And my girlfriend at the time tries to cheer me up. So she gives me a box as a gift. She gives it to me, here, I got you something. I was like, okay, cool. I open it up. I pull it out. And it was this. That's what you think, right? Oh, I was so pissed. I was furious. I didn't work 20 years, whatever it was at that time, shooting all these ball and basket games, playing basketball, getting high school MVP, getting on a college team, all these things, to just someone hand me my dream. This is what I was working for. Subconsciously, this is what I was working for. It was crazy. That's how crazy it was. I see her perspective. I see that she was trying to do something good. I understand. This is literally the one. I can't even look at it. So put it in the basket. But I was so upset, and I couldn't see her perspective. Now I do. Hindsight's always 20/20. But the scariest thing to me now is, what if I stepped up to that plate as a 6-year-old, I took that shot, and I hit it? That's the scariest thing to me. Would have been luck. There's no skill involved, no practice, no hard work. All the things that I learned, missing that shot, set the foundation for the work and the amount of effort that it takes to do what you love to do whatever it is, to complete that task at hand, to be creative, to shoot it on any type of thing you can dream of, because you have to be ready for that moment, that flow state. Flow, if anybody actually read the book called Flow, it's a great book, is where that preparation meets a time of an extended circumstance where that pressure is there. That preparation meets that pressure, and that you can go right into it. And that is where I learned about it. I learned it for the first time. It scares me to death to think of what if I actually hit it. None of this would have happened. So, talking about perspective, I'm going to go. Okay, what I want everybody to do is take your thumb and forefinger. I want you to hold it up, and I want you to make that OK symbol, just like that. Hold it up, and I want you to close one eye. And with the other eye in that circle, I want you to line up the yellow dot in the middle of that circle. Okay? Now, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to change the slide. I'm not going to do anything at all. All I want you to do is close the eye that's open and open the eye that's closed. Is it still in the center? Why not? You can put your hands on. Some of you guys are like, this is amazing. Oh my God. Why not? It's all about perspective. That's all it is. You wrote down a number, right? I want you to change your mind and write down a different number. Did you show anybody?
Same principles?
Yeah, same principles. Just write down a different number. Now that you've been thinking about it too much. Okay. Now, I'm going to show you something else from a different perspective. This used to be the back of my business card. What does everybody see up here? A face? Everybody see face? Okay. Who saw liar? Does everybody see that now? Or now can you see it? It makes more sense, right? Because you just turn it sideways. But some of you didn't see it the first time. All it took was this little shift. Now you can't unsee it. Now if you go back, you can still see it no matter what. It's just that little shift in perspective that can change everything. Now, I have a video that I'd like to share with you guys that I made before. It was a few days ago. We made this video. I'd like to share it with you guys. So let's check it out.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm doing good, man. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing really well. Look.
Oh.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm doing good. Sorry, how are you, man?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing really well. Looks like you guys are having so much fun over there. Where are you?
We're at the MindEdge LINK Symposium.
No way, man. That's so crazy. I'm actually on my way up there. I'm going to be at the MindEdge LINK Symposium. That's so crazy that you're already there.
Dude, that is crazy.
So how about this? Since I'm all the way over here and you're all the way over there, why don't we team up and do something fun with everybody in the room? Sounds good?
Yeah, that sounds cool.
All right, great. So what I need you to do is go grab a few volunteers that want to help out. But before you grab those volunteers, put me in a deep freeze so that I can't hear anything that you're saying.
Okay, cool.
So do that now.
All right, so Mike from the past is in a deep freeze right now. So he can't hear anything that you guys are saying. So this is just between us. Okay, so I need a few volunteers that want to help out with this one. Does anybody want to help out? Then we're going to choose them at random. That's fine. You want to help? Sure. You know what? Then I'll give you this. You could throw it at anybody you want.
Okay.
You could choose anybody. You could even know who they are. It doesn't matter. You're good? All right, join us up here. Let's go. Cool, we just need two, just two. Just two, yeah. You're still coming, yeah, unless you don't want to. You get a pass. I'm not going to force you. Everybody brings up our paper. Cool.
I know, Aaron.
Sure, and your name?
Jack.
Jack? Nice to meet you. Mike, and yours?
I'm Kevin.
Kevin, nice to meet you, Kevin. I'll take this. Cool. So we're going to do a couple things here. We're going to, one of you, all right, we'll start with you. Sure. Jack, right? Okay, Jack. Over here I have a book of quotes. Quotes have been a big thing today, apparently. So I have a book of 20 quotes. Some of them are about creativity. Some are inspirational quotes. Like this one is from Henry Ford. They're all from different people as well. So we're going to choose a quote and a person as well that we might come back to later. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. By Henry Ford. Isn't that so true? Okay. So what I want you to do is there are 20 quotes here. I just want you to give me a number between 1 and 20. So maybe not 1 because you just already saw what that was, but anything else between 1 and 20. What number would you like to use?
7.
7. Is there a reason you chose 7? Random. That's fine. Okay, that's cool. So we have, that's number 1. Number 2. Number 3 is Believe You Can and You're Halfway There by Teddy Roosevelt. 4, Too Many of Us Are Not Living Our Dreams Because We Are Living Our Fears by Les Brown. That's 4. 5, Whatever the Mind of Man Can Conceive and Believe It Can Achieve by Napoleon Hill. 6, You cannot use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have. So you chose 7, which is this one here. I want you to hold on to that, and you're going to read to everybody that quote and who that quote is by. There you go.
Logic will get you from A to B. Imagination will take you everywhere. Albert Einstein.
Logic will get you from A to B, but imagination will take you everywhere. Cool. So hold on to that. Now, are you an iPhone person or Android? Android. Well, we're going to use my iPhone because I have it. Can you open my calculator app?
Sure.
I'm going to ask you to hold on to this calculator because you're going to put in some numbers. Okay, I want everybody in here. I know you're thinking of a 2-digit number. I want everybody in here to think of a 2-digit number, but you don't have any rules, so it could be anything. It doesn't have to be above 20. It could be anything you want. Okay? I'm going to throw this ball over my head. We're going to get a few numbers, maybe about 4 or 5 of them. Sorry if I hit anybody. And do you have a number in mind?
Yep.
What number would you like?
Do you want me to give you the number?
Yeah, we're going to punch in the calculator.
34.
34. Let's type it 34, make sure it's good. Cool. And what would you like to do to that number? Say multiply, divide it, time, whatever you want to do. Minus, add. Add? Okay, say plus. And throw that ball anywhere you'd like. Jeff, what? 12. Okay, so we're going to add 12 to it. And what would you like to do to it?
Add it.
Okay, so add again. And throw that anywhere you like. You got a number?
96.
96.
Okay. Add 96.
Yeah, add 96. What would you like to do? Let's make it big. So multiply maybe?
Yeah.
Sure. Well, I'm just trying to make like a random big number. Okay, so multiply, 96 multiply, throw it somewhere else?
Oh, I already hit add.
Okay, we'll multiply the next one. That's fine.
Okay.
What number would you like?
70.
70? Type in 70.
Okay, plus 70.
Oh, no, times 70.
Okay.
Times 70.
Yep.
Okay, and we're going to get another, throw it again. What would you like? 24. 24. Okay, cool. I want you to divide this whole thing. Do you want another number, or are we good right now? Your choice. Throw it again. We're getting another number. I don't think you're confident with it. We're going to multiply it again by what is it? 11. Multiply by 11. Cool. Okay, now divide the whole thing by 22. I got a number here. So equals, equal? Yeah, we're going to get a big number. Do you have that number?
Yeah.
Cool. Can you write that number down on here?
Yeah.
So we have it. Just so you can look at it.
Yep.
Good? Cool. All right. Put my phone down. I'll take the marker.
Should I hide it from people? Or?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's okay. Sure. Now we're going to resume Mike. He couldn't hear anything that we've been doing. Okay? We're going to zoom Mike. Now, Jack, you have the microphone, right? He might ask you some questions, so hold on a second. Take him out of the freeze.
Boo. It's getting kind of cold in there.
It is October.
It is October already. That fall weather is coming in quickly. So, Mike, did you grab a few volunteers?
Yeah, we got some.
Okay, great. So bring the first one up.
You can stay where you are, it's fine.
Hi.
Hi.
So what is your name?
Jack.
I'm sorry, what was that? I couldn't hear.
Jack.
That's a nice name. I love that name. So are you thinking of the quote or are you thinking of the number?
I'm thinking of the number.
The quote, good, all right. So what I want you to do is just read that quote. Don't say anything out loud. Just read it over and over again in your mind. Just over and over again in your mind. Perfect. Picking up something. Look at me. All right, I think I got this one. Action is the fundamental key to all success. By Pablo Picasso, right?
No, man, that wasn't it.
No? Ouch. Wow, okay, now I'm feeling a lot of pressure up here.
How do you think I feel?
Well, how do you think I feel? I don't know, I'm not getting this one. Wow, this doesn't always happen, but it's happening now. So I have to apologize to all of you. I'm sorry, and sorry, Mike.
Thanks.
Can you, in the microphone, can you please read the quote that you're thinking of and who the quote is by?
Sure. Logic will get you from A to B. Imagination will take you everywhere. Albert Einstein.
That's a good one. That's a really good one. I love Albert Einstein too. Albert Einstein's the best. Who doesn't like Albert Einstein? I should have known it was that one. It's perfect for this too, because we're talking about creativity and imagination is perfect. So that's so true that logic will get you from A to B, but imagination will take you everywhere. That's so crazy that you picked that one too. Perfect one for this, so thank you for picking that one. So, the crazy thing is that I've been talking to you guys about perspective and why perspective is so important. See, the more perspectives that you can gather, the more you collaborate inside and outside of your industry. That's what leads to innovation. So you have to gather those new perspectives. But right now, you guys only have one perspective, the perspective of this camera lens, right? So if I were to switch it over to this camera over here, sometimes the answers become so clear. And now you can see, logic will get you from A to B, but imagination will take you everywhere. So thank you so much for helping, and thank you for choosing that. Thank you so much for helping out.
My pleasure.
All right, so the next volunteer. So you're thinking of the number, correct?
Yes.
Perfect. So I want you to just think about that number and think about how many digits there are as a whole. Okay, it's a pretty big number, right? Pretty big number?
Yes.
Okay, I just want you to think about it, look at it as a whole. Write something down. Look at me. Okay. All right. Can you read the digits in order into the microphone, please?
Yes. 241-60411.
Perfect. That's good. Because I got 24160411. Same number, right? 24160411. Perfect.
Wow.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
But the crazy thing is, as I said, we're talking about perspective. And these two go hand in hand. Because logic will get you from A to B, but imagination will take you everywhere. So don't forget to imagine.
Nice.
And we are truly predicting and building the future here at the MindEdge LINK Symposium. So thank you so much for coming out, and I look forward to seeing you all real soon. Good luck, my friends.
Maybe too soon. I'm here. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, Jack. Cool. All right. Mike from the past is pretty good. He's probably better than me. I guess that guy's pretty good. Yeah. So, all right. So before I wrap up, and if you guys want to keep in contact with me, you totally could. If you have questions or anything, my email's up there. You can find me on social media or anything. I'm very accessible. But before, we chose a quote by Albert Einstein, which is a great quote. Logic will get you from A to B. Imagination is what's going to take you everywhere. Let's see if we could do something. Now, you have that Rubik's Cube you've been mixing up the entire time, right? Can you solve it now?
No.
Why? Why not?
I don't know the algorithm.
Right, so it's knowledge.
Yeah.
It's not impossible. Just like anything you might have saw up here, knowing a word or anything like that, people label it as impossible. It might be highly improbable or whatnot, but if you put in the work to learn the algorithm, to understand it, possibly you could, right? Cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's give it a couple more mixes. I want to show you guys something. You picked a great quote by a great genius and creative person of our time. Albert Einstein. Here's 100 Rubik's Cubes of Albert Einstein. Missing one. Maybe you weren't supposed to solve it. Maybe you're supposed to mix it up just like that. Can I have that cube? I take this cube. I'm going to take it and see. There you go. I give you Albert Einstein. Imagination. All you gotta do is imagine. It'll take you everywhere. To wrap up one more thing. Someone's thinking of a number. You change your mind, you even thought of a different number. So that second number that you have it in your mind? I do. All right, can you please stand for me? Do you mind? No problem. Sure. I want you to get that number in your mind, and I want you to think of the first digit. Just the first digit and the first digit alone. Okay? Keep saying it over again in your mind, over again in your mind. Just look at me. I'm going to go through the digits. Just think about yours. Keep saying yours. It could be a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5. Not interested yet. So 6, 7. It's higher. Thank you so much for confirming that. An 8, a 9. It's somewhere up here. Yes? Okay, cool. Thank you. That confirms that. Thanks for laughing. Always gives it away. Think of the second digit now. Just the second digit. Get it over again in your mind. Keep thinking of it. Now, second digit could be a 0, right? It could be 30, 40, 50 you're thinking of. So think of that 0, whatever you're thinking of. Keep saying it. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's higher also. A 6, a 7, an 8, a 9. There's nothing higher than that. Okay. Maybe. Think of the whole number. Okay, you're recalling it up there. Got it. Cool. Let's see if I can do this here. Yeah, I think so. I trust you. I'm going to ask you a couple questions. Giant Sudoku, that's what it is. I'll ask you a couple questions. They're all going to be yes or no questions. So just answer yes or no to the best of your ability. So if you're not really sure, just there might be a follow-up question, just to the best of your ability. A yes or no, only a yes or no. Do you see your number on this board? No. Okay. Not even to save the end of this presentation. No. Okay. What was your number? 79. 79. Okay. Do you see it now?
Whoa.
Bam.
You said I glanced. Yes.
You see it now? Good. Thank you so much. So you see it now, 79. Cool. Do you feel that I influenced you? We're going to go down these. Influence. Do you feel I influenced you to choose 79? Because you even chose a different number first, right? You had the first number, then you changed your number. Do you feel like it influenced you in any way to choose that number?
Other than you told me to change my number, so I had to.
But you could have chosen any number.
I could have chosen any.
Maybe besides the one that you just chose, maybe, or something. Okay. Do you know that number? No, we'll stay on the one. Maybe we'll get something later. Okay, cool. So you didn't feel influenced besides that I chose you to change your number?
I didn't think so, but I guess I'm about to find out if I was.
No, that's fine. You're not supposed to feel it. You're not supposed to feel the influence, so that's okay. That's good. So there you go, influence. I want to show you now perspective. I'm going to give you my perspective. See, when I was growing up, I was actually bad at math. at least I thought I was bad at math, because I failed it. But I didn't do what the teachers wanted me to do. I saw things a different way. I saw things from a different perspective. I didn't show the work that they wanted me to show them. I did it in a different way. Apparently they don't like that. It's different from the norm. So I'm going to show you a different perspective. If you take 59, you add 1, that's 60, plus 12 is 72, add another 7, you're going to get 79. 11 and 8 is 19, add 58, you're going to get 77, add 2, you're going to get 79. 5 and 10 is 15, plus 3 is 18, add 61, you're going to get 79. 4 and 60 is 64, plus 6 is 70, plus 9 is 69. See that now? Horizontally. Not only do I work horizontally, I work vertically as well. So watch this. You see that now? 59 plus 11, 5 and 4, you're going to get 79. 60, 10 is 70 plus 8 and 1, 79. 6, 3, 58 and 12, 79. 9, 61, 2 and 7, you're going to get 79. Not only do I work horizontally, vertically, that's not enough for you guys, right? I got to step it up. I got to step it up a notch. See, maybe some of you doing this. Got to go diagonally. 79. Diagonally here. 4, 10, 58, 7, you're going to get 79. Actually, any of the mirror images, I did that for you. The bottom 2 plus side 2 here, plus side 2 here, diagonally here, plus diagonally there, diagonally here, plus diagonally there. A lot of people say you're thinking inside the box, you need to go outside the box. I did that for you. I did that for everybody. Just for you, I did in the box. These 4 right here, 8, 58, 3, and 10. You're going to get 79. Outside the box, for fun, I did the 4 corners for you. Right? So we got 4, 59, 7, and 9. There's actually 72 different ways to get to 79, but do you see your number now? All right, thank you so much, guys. You guys have been awesome. Thank you so much.
Great to end with a little magic. Thanks very much for coming, and thus concludes MindEdge LINK Symposium 2018. Thank you.